With Kale at her side, Selena forces her body beyond its limits in her effort to prepare for the looming first trial in her bid to become the king's champion. She judges her competitors at the first gathering of the group, and more than once Selena wishes she could put each of them in their place. However, at the command of her sponsors, Selena tries to perform in the middle of the pack without standing out enough to do well or poorly during her training. Along the way, she meets Nehemia, another potential ally or foe who is similarly captive in the palace at Rifthold. In the end, it takes all of Selena's strength and will to successfully complete the first test.
Hey there, we're BookTok for BookTok with Jac and Amy, your book besties who take the novels you love seriously.
We embrace and respect modern fantasy, romance, and romantasy books written by women. And so it's in our nature to analyze these books as we would any other novel we might have dissected in school.
We combine our 13 years of literary academic training, and we use our education to analyze and give voice to reasons why you may love or may hate today's popular books.
This week, we're discussing chapters 11 through 15 of Sarah J. Maas's debut novel, Throne of Glass. For a complete list of episodes and the chapter breakdowns, be sure to check out our Instagram at the handle BookTok for BookTok.
Before we dive in, let's talk about SPLIT, which feels like our version of SPIL. If you know, you know. SPLIT stands for Spoilers, Perspective, and Interpretation, Language, and Themes.
Spoilers! While our discussion is about Throne of Glass, important context from the first 3 novels in the series will be discussed without spoiler warnings. That is specifically Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, and Heir of Fire. This is not a read-along for anyone who hasn't read at least the first 3 books, and you will be spoiled from here on out. So please take this as your only spoiler warning. For all other spoilers beyond Heir of Fire and other SJM works, we will keep those in the Breadcrumbs and Broomsticks area at the end of the episode.
Perspective and interpretation. What we discuss in this episode are strictly our personal interpretation of the text. We do not speak for Sarah J. Maas and in no way know her intentions for books or characters. We also know our listeners have their own personal views and opinions, and we encourage you to share your thoughts with us because every perspective and interpretation is worth exploring.
Language. Even though Jac tries to keep her swearing to a minimum for the sake of her mother, I definitely do not. And so explicit language does occur.
Themes. We also discuss some heavy subjects throughout the podcast that can include themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death. While we will do our best to give trigger warnings for the darker themes, we will discuss these topics when they are important to the text. Listener discretion is advised.
As always, we love keeping the conversation going because our listeners are so good at finding things we've overlooked or missed completely. You can share your interpretation of the text with us by posting on social media, tagging us in stories, sending us DMs, or submitting to the forum on our website. We also post more exclusive content and host live streams for our Patreon supporters. You can find us at patreon.com/BookTok for BookTok. This week, we're asking ourselves the question, what do we learn about how Selena views herself in the way she judges others?
Themes we'll see in this section include pride and judgment. But before we go forward and before you issue your judgment onto us, quick heads up, it is January 11th when we're recording this. The last episode we recorded was in December. LA is on fire. We live in LA. We had 2 fires that were really close to us. I had to go leave to my aunt's. My uncle died. I've been a mess. We're hanging on by a thread here, guys. So I forgot that we have a podcast. I forgot how to podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, you're also saying like this feels so foreign to us.
Yeah, that's what happens when we go from recording 2 episodes a week to not recording for 3 or 4 weeks. So we're readjusting to how we do this.
Yep. So, please take pity on us and donate to any fire relief.
We're starting in chapter 11, and it is the first morning since Selena has met all her competitors for the position of the King's Champion. Now, I find it very curious that it's Kale and not Philippa who is waking up Selena. It's like Philippa doesn't exist, to be honest, for the next 10 chapters.
Oh, yeah.
Despite her surroundings, Selena continues to be treated like a prisoner, even though she's been 100% compliant up until this point. Now, if you've read this series, you know Kale just doesn't trust anybody, and we're seeing that in how Selena is being treated right now. Kale's intention is obviously to keep a close eye on Selena at all times. That's why he's the one waking her up, eating breakfast with her, escorting her places. This action continues to remind us, and Celaena herself, of the power dynamics, that Celaena does not have anyone she can lord over, though I promise she will try.
The way he wakes her up too is pretty aggressive. Like, it's unnecessarily aggressive. Quote, she shimmied beneath the blankets, pulling them over her head, but he grabbed the covers and threw them to the floor. I find this also a good scene because we're seeing her in a bed this time, because the last time that Kale woke her up, she was sleeping on the floor. And we talked about her sleeping on the floor last time as really showing that she's struggling to adjust to this non-slave lifestyle. And here we're seeing that she's adapting, but not necessarily healing, but we can see her adapting. So it's a good way of subtle progression of growth on SJM's part.
She can't heal because Kale is treating her like he's a guard at a prison and she's a prisoner. Like,
yeah. I mean, this is just great foreplay. Again, in my mind, they're all in their late 20s and 30s. But am I wrong? So despite her new surroundings, Celaena is tired and ill-prepared for the trial ahead. Celaena thinks to herself, quote, it would have been nice if the Crown Prince had considered springing her from Endovier earlier so she could have some time to regain her strength. This begs the question that I am sure Celaena is wondering, because I am wondering it. If Dorian really wants her to win, why did he wait until the last minute to go? And I know there's a lot of time for traveling, but he gave her no time to prepare because now that she's here, the thing is starting. He's basically setting her up for failure. Yeah.
The other question I ask myself is it more about Dorian trying to show his strength and defiance against his father by picking Celaena, and he doesn't really care if she wins? So I have lots of questions.
I definitely think he doesn't care about winning, and it's just about pissing off his dad. If he cared about winning, one, yes, he would give her more time to train, you know. I also feel like that's such a early princeling Dorian move where he just doesn't think ahead and he's like, oh, right, you have to account for travel. Yeah. And who knows what the time zones are in this place too. And, you know, she's just trying to adjust. And speaking as someone who is in a different time zone, but if he really did care about her winning, why wouldn't he be here helping her train? Why wouldn't he be at least more of a presence in this book at this point? So I think you're onto something. I want to look at this particular quote, and this is when Kale throws the sheets off of Celaena. Quote, if he noticed how much skin she was showing, he didn't react. I find the dynamic that Celaena has with her own body and the way that other people, particularly men, view her body to be very poignant. So for this moment, sex, the female body, everything about Celaena does not work on Kale. And it shows that she's going to need different tools when it comes to him. And we're going to see in this episode, as we did in the past episodes, that Celaena clocks when men look her up and down. And this is one of those, like, Kale's just not like the other boys moment.
He's so pick-me.
He's so pick-me. He doesn't even pick her.
As Kale is forcing Celaena out of bed, Celaena commands him. Fetch my slippers, she mumbled. The floor's like ice. Now, on one hand, when I first read this, I felt like this was retaliation on Celaena's part. She's trying to disrupt the current power dynamics and gain some control by making this demand of Kale. However, I also came to realize this might actually be a subtle breadcrumb, because Celaena is in fact royal, and she is treating him like a servant, like she would if she was the princess of this palace.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it totally is like, go get me my slippers. Another point of view, fake demands to prove a point just to rile him up. I don't think she actually expects him to go get her slippers or anything, but she's doing it to get a reaction. Her legs didn't do it. So what if I demand some slippers, especially since, you know, skin's not showing. So then we have this quote. He growled, but Celaena ignored him as she got to her feet. So she is getting a reaction out of him, but in my mind, it's a combo of, because her princessness really slips in, even though she was only a princess till she was 8. But you know what? You can take the girl out of the princess, but you can't take the princess out of the girl.
Yep, that's how the saying goes. Now we come to learn that the reason Celaena happens to be so tired is because she was reading all night. And I can't blame her for that. You know, she hasn't had access to books in a long time. It makes sense. But we also see that tiredness impact her well being. She, quote, staggered and slouched as she goes to the table. This is important because this is one of several times in this chapter and the coming chapters in this episode that Selena allows her weakness to be seen. As a prideful person, this is unusual and it will quickly be nipped in the bud. But for right now, Selena can't help it. There's too much to hide that she's not capable of hiding it. She doesn't care now, but as she comes to meet her fellow competitors, she will care very much.
Seriously. I mean, I get it. It's hard not to go to sleep reading this Draco Hermione fan fiction right now. It is. Wait, actually, just so people know when I'm reading, I dropped my phone on that one. I was really excited. But people always ask me what Draco Hermione fan fiction I'm reading, and this is such a diversion. Okay, Secrets and Masks. Anyway, so I understand staying up all night reading. However, there is a certain cockiness to her doing this. She has been enslaved for a year now. She has been working in the mines, and yet there is a certain amount of confidence of, I don't need to get ready to train. I can just stay up all night, and that pride, that ego is going to come back. We're going to see it soon, over and over and over again.
Yeah, I'm so glad you pointed that out because I didn't even think about the fact that this is one of the only times we see her stay up all night to read. Mm-hmm. And it's because she's overly confident that despite a year of slavery, she's still Aderlin's greatest assassin.
Fine. Yeah. I'll be fine. These boys are stupid. And then she's going to get her ass kicked. And then suddenly the training sequence begins.
I was going to start singing a montage like from Rocky. I don't even remember what it is, so never mind.
I was going Mulan.
Also acceptable.
Make a man out of you.
I did appreciate that when Selena goes to eat her breakfast, she explicitly, quote, stabbed her fork into a piece of sausage. It's just a friendly reminder that even a fork can be a weapon, and Selena is quick to wield weapons.
Sausage, like his sausage. I'm just saying, like, that's fair. We know what we're doing. She's stabbing a sausage and biting it. There is a threat there.
Ultimately, though, Cale does call her out for the weakness she's demonstrating and asking her why she's so tired. Is he shaming her for her weakness, or is he asking out of concern because he wants to make sure Dorian succeeds? I don't know. I think he just likes to give Selena as much as she gives him in terms of sassiness.
He's a sassy boy. I also think that Cale knows that she's a fighter and is surprised by her lack of caring and being prepared, because Cale is meticulous. Cale is captain of the guard. He's regimented. He knows what it takes. Mm-hmm. She is Aderlin's greatest assassin. So why the hell is she doing just reading and not caring? So I think he's a little bit surprised at what's going on with her here. And it's like, don't you care?
Yeah, right. I mean, because unlike maybe Dorian, I'm making an assumption there, Cale knows what it takes to stay fit, stay on top of your game. And reading is not part of staying on top of your game as an assassin. So either he's shocked at her ego, mm-hmm. or he's shocked that she's not taking it more seriously and realizing how weak she is right now, because she is malnourished, right?
Yeah.
Everybody can see that. So
I have a thought real fast. I just want to share before you go into your next thought. Dorian is like, because we live in LA, I hope you know exactly what I'm talking about. Dorian is the guy at the gym who has no chest hair, who has the most ripped six-pack, but like can't really lift a desk to save his life. He's like fake hot, you know what I mean? Like he's not actually strong. It's just like the muscles are perfect. Versus Cale reminds me of the guys where, you know, there's some hair on the chest, and does he have a six-pack? No. But damn, he can pick some things up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know,
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
But, you know, just a little girthy and like, you know, but a good kind. Anyway, we're back. They're 29 and 30 plus in my mind. Remember this.
Got it. Selena explains to Cale, quote, I sent a letter to your princeling asking for permission to borrow books from the library. He granted my wish and sent 7 books from his personal library that I'm commanded to read. This is followed by, quote, she gave him a simpering smile and took a bite of ham. He could have ignored the letter, and besides, I'm his champion. Not everyone feels obligated to be as nasty to me as you do. Selena in this moment is being extremely patronizing to Kale, and in some ways, this is the only way she has power over him. I feel like she's trying to gaslight Kale at this moment by trying to convince him and demonstrate, well, I'm just following orders the prince told me to read. And therefore, if she can follow orders, she can be trusted. Also, at the same time, Selena's probably, and rightly so, trying to get under Kale's skin by implying closeness with the prince, which we're going to learn over the course of several episodes. This is very annoying to Kale. Kale does not want Selena and Dorian to have any relationship. What we're seeing is this kind of game-like dynamic between Kale and Selena, and they both enjoy it, but they pretend to not enjoy it. At this moment, it's obvious to me that Selena doesn't like Kale. However, for all of us who've read this book, we know that that's going to start to change really, really fast. And I will be interested to see if we think it's believable.
I'm just so happy that, she kind of gets with both of them. Good for her. Good for her.
Why choose?
Why choose? This novel could have been so different if it was for adults. Anyway, let's have a discussion about clothing. And I'm coming from this at the feminist lens. Quote, Kale spoke to the servant girl. Dress her in pants and a shirt, something loose, nothing frilly or revealing, and bring a cloak. The girl disappeared into the dressing room. Selena followed after her, unceremoniously stripping down to her underclothes and enjoying it far too much when Kale's cheeks reddened before he turned away. There's an interesting dynamic happening here, and a couple things are playing out. One, Kale is ordering Selena's clothes. And the way that he's ordering it and what he's ordering for her is meant to empower her and make her successful. However, he's the one who's ordering it, so it's not really her empowerment or her success. Two, she is using her body to make him uncomfortable because of the bare legs didn't work earlier, so now it's like, well, what if I showed you more? And then three, I feel like Selena is using her body to make him uncomfortable because of the power he just exhibited. Because he's the one who's demanded, these are the clothes you're going to wear. She's saying, bitch, please look at me more now. And then when Selena sees her clothes, she says, quote, I look ridiculous. These pants are absurd and the shirt is awful. Stop whining. No one gives a damn about your clothes. Besides, you can take them off at the barracks. I'm sure everyone will be thrilled to see you in your undergarments. We just got a little Uno reverse, right? So at this moment, beforehand, she stripped down and he got, a little red. So, I'm sure Selena was thinking 0.1 Selena. But now at this point, Kale's saying he does not care and saying, go ahead, go strip for the other people, whatever. And she's pointing out the fact that the clothes are ridiculous. How ridiculous are they? How it's just her whining about it, like to make a point, I can't imagine them being particularly frilly. Like he says that they're not frilly. He says that they're not to be stupid or, they're meant to be useful. And then at the same time, he's saying, go ahead, show off your body. It's not like I care.
So I'm going to look at the same moment, but through the Marxist lens and looking back at this idea that Kale's like, well, I'm sure everyone will be thrilled to see you in your undergarments. If clothing is power, which I do think it is for Selena, this could be viewed as a metaphor for how the competition already views Selena. She's vulnerable, she's weak, probably mostly because she's a woman. The sexual undertones of this comment do bother me. Now, I understand that it's in retaliation to the fact that Selena basically stripped in front of Kale. However, I think in the context of what the conversations are going to be with the other competitors, especially how women are expected to be sex providers for men, makes this sexual conversation now seem very naive and ill-fitting.
Yeah.
Because that disappears very quickly from the conversation that Kale and Selena are going to have in the future.
We can pick up already that there's a lot of sexual violence against women in this world. And it just, you're going to get more of that and it just gets more icky. At this point then, Kayla, oh, I found their power couple name. Kale and Selena enter the fighting space where they're going to train, and not just them, but like all the challenges are going to happen and everyone's training there. Quote, the giant rectangular room they entered was the size of a grand ballroom. Lined with pillars that supported a mezzanine, the floor was checkered with black and white tile, and the floor-to-ceiling glass doors that made up one entire wall were open, the gossamer curtains blowing in the chilly breeze that drifted in from the garden. It's very grandiose. It's meant to be very ostentatious, and there's this performance of like, you will perform your death for us. And there's going to be a little thing that I noticed later. So,
Oh,
circle back.
I'm excited to hear it. Outside the safety of her private quarters, Selena no longer has the luxury of being the snide version of herself that she is with Chaol. Like Jac said, this is theater. Everything has become performance. Selena's been given the role of Lady Lillian Gordania? Gordiana? Gordania?
Lady Gordy.
Let's stick with Lady Lillian. And she plays that part. And honestly, I'm impressed how quickly she falls into that play acting role.
Mm-hmm.
We see this when Selena and Chaol get to the training room. Selena comments, quote, "You expect me to use a mace an hour after sunrise? I'm just a jewel thief, remember?" What does this achieve when Selena was so annoyed the day before that she was told that this is her identity? Falling into this role of Lady Lillian that she's been assigned allows her to once again demonstrate obedience, which I think is part of her continuing to try to gaslight Chaol. In her mind, when she looks around and sees all the weapons in the room, she thinks, quote, "Foolish, foolish decision to leave all these weapons out. Swords, sword breakers, axes, bows, pikes, hunting daggers, maces, spears, throwing knives, wooden staves. While she generally preferred the stealth of a dagger, she was familiar with every weapon here." Selena continues her performance even when Cain shows up in the training space. For whatever reason, he decides to approach Selena, and she doesn't balk at his words and tries to make sure she doesn't come across as weak at the same time. After Cain speaks to Selena, quote, "gave him a closed lip smile. The fun's just starting, isn't it?" I want to point out that right now her smile is closed-lipped. It's reserved, it's demure, it's mindful. She's not ready to show her fangs quite yet, which is appropriate to her role. She's a lady, she's aristocracy. But that's going to change the second she's no longer confident in what's going on.
Yeah, I love her dynamic with Cain in the sense that it says a lot about Selena. And I'm going to keep coming to this point throughout the entire episode. So the way that Selena views Cain, like I said, is going to speak about how she views herself. It's almost like we have themes and questions for this episode to do with that. Quote, "It would have been so easy to whirl and grab him by the neck and slam his face into the ground. She didn't even realize she was trembling with rage until Chaol stepped into her line of vision." Why does she feel rage at this moment? I can almost understand why Cain would come up to her first. She's a woman. She's most vulnerable in theory, not actuality, but in his mind, she's the weakest there. So an evil guy like Cain would go and pick on the weakest one there. No logic there, but threatening men have no logic. Now, I'm coming back to this question. Why does this moment make her feel rage? And this is after Cain, quote, "his dark eyes snaked along her body, then found her face again and dismisses her at that point." Like he looks her up and down, he takes everything in and just, whatever, I have no interest in you. So like I was saying, he walks into the room and in theory, his action shows that she's a threat. But I believe that his action in his mind is showing to mock her, is that she is a joke there. And that up and down look, it's a silent objectification. And then he dismisses her. And there's like this element where he questions her courage, almost about like being there, of why she's there or not. And she's experienced all of these things already, right? She's already had people dismiss her. She's already had people look her up and down and objectify her. And yet she still feels rage. Why now? Why is it? And the best that I can come up with, so unless you think of anything else, is that Cain gets to be what Selena cannot. He gets to be a peacock with his weapons and his, "I am a murderer," but she doesn't get to show off. And Cain is everything that Selena's more vicious assassin side wants to be and doesn't get to be.
Yeah. I completely agree with what you're saying. And this gave me a thought that Cain picks Selena. I mean, he could have picked the 12-year-old boy who's here. I mean, he's not really 12, but he could have,
Yeah.
But this is what bullies do, right? They pick the weakest person everyone else perceives as weak as well to make them seem so big. And quite frankly, if Selena had her rathers, if she was autonomous, she would do the same.
Yeah.
She would peacock around. She would try to bully someone else as well. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to talk a lot over the next few episodes how Selena is moral, But she's also a bully.
Not? Yeah.
But not.
Like, your thought sparked from my thought, sparked to my another thought. So what is she doing? Like, you're right. She would be, if if she got to be the assassin, she would go and bully someone else. She can't. So what does she do? She bullies Kaltain because that's the only person that she gets to be a bully. And I think we need to accept that we are not getting Aelin. We are getting Celaena.
Yeah.
Celaena kind of sucks.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. And I mean, shit rolls downhill. Like,
yeah,
if you're getting shit from above you, you're going to give shit below.
Yeah.
It's just how it happens. And that's unfortunately what's going to happen to Kaltain.
Yeah. But I mean, like, also, I know people are going to be like, but I love Aelin. Aelin is great. We're going to get to Aelin, but in order to create a diamond, you have to shit first. I don't know. I was trying to go through your metaphor, but
you have to put pressure on the coal.
On the shit, yes, to get a diamond.
It might have been shit. It's fossilized shit, probably.
She'll become great, but we have to just see it what it is. She kind of sucks.
Yeah, right now. She has her moments that are good, and she has many moments that are bad.
Yeah, she's growing.
I just want to point out something because SJM does this in her other books, and I thought it was worth pointing out that as Celaena is looking at all the jewelry, looking at all the weapons, you can describe them almost as if they were jewelry. Quote, all the weapons were finely made and glistened in the sunlight. She found herself torn between the hunting daggers and a lovely rapier with an ornate bell guard. This is important in my mind because a couple of reasons. One, it's the princess in her that is attracted to the finer things. You would expect someone like Dorian to have an ornate bell guard, but you would not expect someone like Chaol to have an ornate bell guard. So that's, for me, one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is she loves weapons. She loves her craft. And she has not been able to adorn herself in fine clothing, in jewelry, in weapons for a year. And so she's really cherishing this moment as she's reviewing the weapons.
I love it. I love it. Also, side note to the listener, if you hear things in the background, those are the helicopters fighting the fires near me. I can see there's a bunch, like they cross over me. I think there's a reservoir kind of nearby, but
that makes sense.
I just saw like 3 helicopters and I can hear it. So if listener, if you can hear it, reminder, there's a fire. All right. Someone wrote, when I posted on our Instagram, someone sent, where's Aelin?
Come control the fire.
Come help us. Yeah. So for the first time in this book, Celaena gets access to a weapon. Quote, the sword whined as she drew it from the stand and held it in her hands. It was a good blade, strong, smooth, light. They wouldn't let her have a butter knife on the table, but they gave her access to this? There's a contradictions in the actions, right? Like she can't have a butter knife, but she can have a whole ass sword. I think it shows a lot about the place that they're in. The setting, the king, the everything, the actual palace. The people who think they have the power, which are the deadly champions, the ones who have the weapons, actually don't have the power. And then the people you think don't have the power, like the ones who aren't capable of fighting, like the king, is actually the controlling manipulator who is in power of everything. So it is opposite day, right? Everyone here, they think they're strong. They're wielding their sword. This is me wielding a sword, but you're not strong.
Yeah. And what I think is really important about this sequence is that we're building up this false narrative in the mind of Celaena and the other champions that they do have power. And that's very, very quickly going to be taken away from them.
Realizing that SJM has like a really big theme in her, at least in this one and in Crescent City, and I can't remember and in Ekatar, false power and giving people enough power over something to think that they have power.
Yep.
Fun facts.
It's how you lull people into complacency. If they think they have power, there's no reason for them to rebel, to fight back, to try to gain power. But if you secretly
I have power, what do you think we have power over? Your cats? No, they have power over you.
No, they don't. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best example.
And yet we have fallen victim to them.
Yeah. All the time. Throughout the episode, we're going to see Celaena judge other people's abilities simply by the way they appear or things they say, instead of waiting to see what they're actually capable of. The first time we see this happen is with Chaol. Celaena is unimpressed when he says, on your guard, when they choose to spar each other.
I feel like you can hear Selena in her head being like, nerd.
Yeah, exactly. Of
Loser.
just like,
On your guard. Who says
who
that?
says that?
Dork. Yeah. Like the bully she is.
Yeah, she's such a bully. Kale then comments about the amount of killing Selena did in Endovier as evidence that she doesn't need to brush up on the basics. Selena responds, quote, "That was with a pickaxe," she said, her smile growing feral. "All I had to do was crack a man's head open or hurl the axe into his stomach. If you consider that sort of gracelessness equal to swordsmanship, what sort of fighting do you do, Captain Westfall?"
Boom.
Yeah, I mean, again, Selena sees her craft as an art form. And to suggest basic survival is comparable to her craft means you have no true understanding of what it means to be a fighter in Selena's mind. An assassin in Selena's mind. Exactly. What I like about this quote is that we see a little bit of Selena's savagery coming through. And this is the darkness that we're going to learn Kale is waiting to see come out of Selena. She does have that savagery. She does have that bully, but she doesn't always let it show. What's important right now is that Selena is mocking Kale and the implication that he doesn't respect the craft the way she does. And that does rile him. And it makes sense when you consider the fact she stayed up all night reading. And he's like, WTF, like that's not what a trained fighter does. These two, Kale and Selena, are going to be constantly engaged in a battle of wills and skills. And no matter how skilled Selena is, it does not negate her weakness from her time in Endovier or the skill she assumed Kale would not have, because she definitely thought Kale would not have skill. To say on your guard before sparring implies you only know the practice version of swordsmanship, of fighting. You don't know what it means to really fight in battle or in a life or death situation. We see Selena's arrogance through that assumption, and I think it's the kind of arrogance that comes with youth. She's going to say she knows not to take people at face value, but she still does. And that feels like a very young thing for her to do.
Does this mean that I'm young? Because I feel like I'll do that sometimes too. If someone, I'm like, God, what a nerd. And then when I say that, I mean mostly my stepdad, guys. Don't worry. I'm not a true bully.
That's fair.
What's also funny, though, is like later on, we're going to learn more about Kale's upbringing and why he knows how to fight, and then she's going to become impressed with that. So it's kind of nice that we have this, he kind of sucks. How does he know how to fight? And then we're going to find, and then her judging him, and then later on, pretty quickly, she's going to not judge him. So I like the little bookends and how things are resolved fairly quickly in this, you know, like she doesn't wait till the end of the book.
Yeah, I think SJM does a nice balancing of the scales. Selena will go too far one way, and then very quickly something will happen to tip her back onto the, I judged too soon.
Yeah, but that's growth, you know? Like that's how we're seeing her grow.
Yeah.
And, you know, Selena sees the art, like you were saying, and that there's beauty even in death. So the sword fighting compared to dancing, right? Because like we said, there's an art there. Quote, sword play was like dancing. Certain steps must be followed or else it would fall apart. Once she heard the beat, it all came rushing back. The other competitors faded away into shadow and sunlight. She was moving fast, fast like a dancer in a temple ritual, fast like a snake in the red desert. This is the art, right? Like this is the thing. This is art, this is death, and she finds beauty in art. We know she likes music. We're going to see that she likes dancing, all these things that a princess would like, or, you know, anyone. But this is all the things that she likes that's in one. I truly believe that Selena doesn't actually like to cause death. I don't think she really necessarily likes to kill. I think she tries to find the beauty in death in order to survive it. Death and violence has a beauty, but it also becomes almost a spiritual experience, hence the dancer at a temple ritual. So she's good at it. She acts, I mean, we have to understand this is all an act. We do not know what Selena is like. We do not know her likes, her dislikes, what this is actually impacting her. So my conclusion is that because we're seeing her connect it to things that she likes, to beauty, it doesn't actually show that she likes it. I believe this is us seeing her trying to cope with it.
I think that's a really great point, because if we look at that last little piece, being a dancer in a temple ritual, and this idea of spiritual experiences, that's an out of body experience. And if she's doing something that she doesn't like, she has to disassociate from her body, the body that is committing the act, in order to have that spiritual disconnect, right? And it makes sense that she's disassociating so that she can find beauty, so that she can deal with whatever guilt or other feelings of shame she might carry by being an assassin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately for Selena, Cale does dominate the fight and knock Selena on her feet. Cale, they all start with C's.
I know.
Cale, Selena, Kane. I keep getting them all confused.
That, to me, that's like a first book mistake.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. It doesn't matter if they sound different, if they all
different letters. Yeah. Different letters.
Change the letters.
There's many of them. 28.
26, actually.
Shit. I'm thinking about Puerto Rico and Hawaii and Alaska, those other random ones on the side. Oh no. I went to college for so many years. I have a master's in comparative literature. What the fuck? Okay. We're all human. There's 26 letters. I haven't counted recently.
Yeah, there are 26.
I'm bad at math.
That's the right answer. So Cale does dominate the fight against Selena's assumptions and knocks Selena to her feet. During this time, Kane is watching and grins at Selena when they make eye contact, to which Selena, quote, bares her teeth at him. So this is the opposite of her polite closed lip smile from before, the demure, the reserved. Selena is on the ground. Not only is she already viewed as being vulnerable, she is physically vulnerable on the ground. And she was bested by Cale in front of everyone else. Once again, emphasizing the viewpoint that she is weak against men. It's not surprising that her ego and general safety are feeling threatened right now. She has to bare her teeth to appear more threatening, like an animal, in an instant where she obviously does not have the upper hand. And that's what animals do. They bare their teeth. Cobras, expand their hood because they feel vulnerable. And that's the only way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying I see this in books all the time. They bared their teeth. They do.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. Be ferocious. Bare your teeth at me. You're so uncomfortable.
I am uncomfortable.
It's like... I feel like
it looks like you're constipated.
I feel like in the real world it actually shows a lack of control. Like if someone were to actually kind of do that, like if you were to watching this a YouTube version of the episode, you'd see me trying to bare my teeth. I interpret that as a loss of control. So,
yeah,
but in books they do it all the time.
I know. And I know it's supposed to make them seem animalistic, or the Fae do it a lot. Fae always seem to bare their teeth. It's a very ugly action.
Unless you're a vampire. It doesn't work.
Okay, yeah. It works with vampires.
Vampires only. Werewolves allowed. Canines. Her ego, Selena's ego, it is showing here. Quote, "You have the skills," Cale said, "but some of your moves are still undisciplined." She broke her stare with Kane and glared up into Cale's face. "That's never stopped me from killing before," she spat. This goes against what Selena feels, right? She sees art and dancing in her movements when she's fighting, and yet he's calling her out for missing it, right? You can't have dance and not be disciplined, right? Discipline is one of the most important things when you're dancing. He's accusing her of not having that. So you can kind of see where it stings extra. So especially she's spent years being disciplined.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, imagine being like a ballerina and someone saying, your arm's a little
you're not really holding your form.
You're not. Yeah. You're not holding your form. Your form is weak. That's what he's saying to her. You are weak.
Yeah.
And that is not okay with Selena.
It's going to a prima ballerina and saying, "Oh, your posture's not great."
Yeah. Woo. Prepare to die.
Right?
For maybe the first time since leaving the safe haven of her quarters, Selena is showing what she really thinks to combat her feelings of vulnerability. It is not often that Selena says something that is truthful. that would be inconsistent with her gaslighting people into thinking she's obedient, right? She's not supposed to demonstrate how vicious she can be. So when she tells Kale, quote, "You'll be sweating when I skin you alive and squish your eyeballs beneath my feet," that is not something she should admit to. And yet Kale responds, "That's the spirit," which I really like this moment and this exchange, because at the heart of them, at the heart of Selena and at the heart of Kale, they actually have a lot in common. And this right here demonstrates some of the viciousness they both have is similar. And I think why they do ultimately become drawn to each other. Unfortunately for Kale, he has a hard time appreciating it when he also mistrusts it. And in some ways, that's a reflection of himself, right? In some ways, he can't even trust himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a topic for another book.
Another time.
Anyway, back to Selena. Like Cain, Selena's no longer hiding her threats. And I think that's important. I think, as Jac has already been saying, there is a connection between Cain and Selena. They are similar. We're going to see it. Selena's not capable of seeing it because in this moment, both Cain and Kale are not taking her seriously and view her as a weaker opponent. So instead, Selena associates Kale with Cain instead of herself with Cain. And I think that complicates some of Selena's views of Kale.
We're going to do some A plus B equals C. So if Selena views herself as Cain and she views Cain as Kale, Selena is Kale.
Which is accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. That was just one chapter. I hope everyone's happy.
Wow, it's already been an hour.
I know.
We are now in chapter 12, and Brullo, who is what? Weapons master?
Something.
He's master of something, of fighting, enters the training area, and each of the champions introduces themselves. This is prime time for Selena to do some judging. Honestly, it feels like the first class, any first like college seminar class where there's 20 people in it and you all have to introduce yourselves. Everybody is judging each other.
I never was judging each other.
I definitely was. Especially in writing classes.
And that's hilarious how much you're like, where is everyone? And I'm thinking, is any guy here cute or single?
And I was like, I don't think they'll be a good writer. They might be a good writer. The naivety of youth. I am just as bad as Selena when I was her age.
I haven't grown. Are they kind of cute? Are they single?
Priorities, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though the chapter starts with Selena thinking, quote, she knew better than anyone not to underestimate opponents based on their appearance. It's exactly what does not happen with Selena.
Yeah, and it's insight to her own reality, how people are constantly judging her and have different expectations of her because of how she looks. And yet she does the same, but whatever.
Yeah. It's quid pro quo, and that's a concept we see in all of SJM's books, but I was really shocked at how much it's in this book, in Throne of Glass.
It's overt. It's very aggressive in your face.
It is. It is very much the Mosaic Law, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It's the same thing. Whatever Selena receives from people, she's going to put back out.
Yep.
So we start with Cain. When Cain reveals he's from the White Fang Mountains, Selena thinks, quote, she'd heard tales of the brutality of the mountain folk from that region. Many of them had rebelled against Aderlin, and most wound up dead. What would his fellow mountain dwellers say if they could see him now? She gritted her teeth. What would the people of Terrasen say if they could see her now? See, Selena is not immune to comparison, and where she didn't see it in the last chapter, she's seeing it now, that she and Cain are not unsimilar. Now, we're supposed to read this and interpret it as Selena's not particularly proud of her circumstance right now and what she's doing, and she doesn't really want to be the king's champion, but she doesn't have the luxury of choice. It's a means to an end, and that end is freedom. However, even if freedom is the ultimate goal, that does not stop the fact that she and Cain are alike, and ultimately through their actions, they are betraying their people.
It's so much internal conflict going on, and we do not see it. You know, you just kind of have, like, this is one of those things that when you do the reread, you start to see, oh my God, I missed this. And even though it's right in our faces.
Yeah, yeah. This is what I love about early SJM writing, This was what I loved about A Court of Thorns and Roses, is that there is so much happening that is not surface level.
But I also think that's why these books are so quickly dismissed.
Yeah, I also agree. I agree. We then get a look at the other assassins in the room. Now, Selena doesn't retain the names of the other assassins that are in the group, and she immediately writes them off based on their appearances. Quote, they weren't even in the Assassin's Guild. Not that Arobin Hamel would ever allow them in. Membership required years of training and a more than impressive track record. While these four might have been skilled, they lacked the refinement that Arobin favored in his followers. Once again, we see Selena's pride rearing its head, and we're also seeing that maybe it's not just because of her princessness, it's because it's been bred into her by her mentor, by Arobin. Status and membership among fellow assassins is important, and that hierarchy determines whether she takes these assassins seriously, and that's something she would never have learned if not for Arobin. In a lot of ways, it's not unlike the royal court, it's just the villain's version, like royal court, villain's version. It's ironic because Selena's going to have so much disdain for women of the royal court, but she can't see that she's in her own way just one of them. She's part of the assassins' royal court, and she is treating these other assassins just like the other women in the royal court treat her. For me, it reminds us that Selena is an unreliable narrator. She just thought, I don't judge people by their appearance. And here you are, judging them by their appearance, their lack of membership.
Babe, you're not listening to yourself.
No, not at all. She's 19.
Oh, truth.
Maybe 18, actually.
Oh, no. 29. In my 29. And then everyone else is in their 30s. Okay. I want to go back to this quote. While these four might be skilled, they lack the refinement that Arobin favored in his followers. We're getting hints of these really complicated relationship that Selena has with Arobin, and it's going to unfold more. We're going to get a little bit more of that in this episode, but just little things, because there's a level of pride there, you know, like, well, Arobin wouldn't have had these guys, and she's above. She went to University of Assassin. I don't know. Assassin U. Now we're going into the Eye Eater. Quote, as his name suggested, Bill Chastain, the Eye Eater ate the eyes of his victims. He looked surprisingly plain, with mousy brown hair, tan skin, average height, though Selena had trouble not staring at his scar-flecked mouth. We've talked in other seasons about the ways that SJM uses first and last names. I will not call it the Taylor Swift effect. However, it's just the fact that you can have sometimes just a few details with vivid imagery. Please see All Too Well, the 10-minute version, to get that visceral feeling. Also, there's this idea that he eats eyes, and, you know, that is absolutely disgusting. But I think it's also a way of him showing control of the victims. That's like what cannibals do. But it adds an extra horror to make his death easy, you know? That first death, they killed someone. It's on purpose that SJM does it to a character that we already hate now.
Right, because morality is not part of the equation yet for us or for Selena.
Yeah, it's like, good. Take him out.
Yeah, he deserves to be killed.
Absolutely. So now we get into Grave. Quote, Grave made her pause. He was slight and short, with a kind of wicked face that made people quickly look away. He entered the room wearing shackles. As he introduced himself, Grave flashed an oily smile, revealing his brown teeth. Her disgust did improve when Grave ran an eye over her body. An assassin like that never stopped at just killing. Not if his victims were female. She willed herself to hold his hungry gaze. I wish there was a different phrase than eyes rolling over, going over someone's body. Like, just make it slightly, do it like we've had that phrase used so many times. Just change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyway, on one level, you can tell that this is a description that a new author would use. Oh, that was my note. That's hilarious. I didn't even look at my note. That was just my soul, and my soul spoke both times. Okay. My second note. We are trying to get to the point that, yes, Selena is beautiful. She has a nice body, even though she, in theory, gained weight in just a few short weeks. But, we're going to lean into it. And men are finding her attractive. What I'm going to do instead is analyze it like literature. Because at first, when I very first read it, I was like, oh my God, you're beautiful. I get it. Like, just let's move on. I'm going to take this as literature, like the whole point of this podcast is. The fact that Selena keeps noticing that men look her up and down, it's something that she clocks and will likely remember. Quote, she willed herself to hold his hungry gaze. And I feel like that quote leans into this theory because it shows that there's a meaning when someone looks her up and down and looks at her body. And she is noticing it every single time. So I think it's more than just like, oh my God, all these guys think I'm super hot. It's how are you looking at me? You're looking at me up and down. Do I like it when Kale does it? Or do I not like it when this person does it? Does she even like it when Kale does it? Or does she like that she has control over him?
That's a
You
great
know?
question.
You
Great
know?
question.
Thank you. That was came au natural. I did not have that written.
Can I add a point?
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks. I love that you brought this up because when I read this quote, I definitely read it not differently, but I saw the intent of this section differently and this description differently.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's because Marxist lens for me. When I read an assassin like that never stopped at just killing, not if his victim was female, I read violence against women.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, I guess, and maybe it's just the way we're talking about it, right? You're talking about it of Selena clocking it. For me, it's setting the tone that we've already discussed, which is this world is not kind to women. Violence against women is a big theme, and Selena knows it. Selena is acutely aware of how violent men can be toward women. And it's not about herself, it's about all women. And we learn through other experiences or other memories Selena has, she's an angel of vengeance who will come kill these men for the violence they commit against other women. It doesn't have to be herself.
And I agree. I think it's two. I agree with that. And I agree with what I think it's merger of the two.
I think it's both. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like there is this violence against women. I forgot to bring it up, but yes, you're right. Like there is this clearly she's saying it without saying it. He's a rapist and she can tell that. And the way he's looking her up and down, we're getting different views of how men look her up and down. We had Kale earlier this chapter. We have Cain who looked her up and down and dismissed her. And we have this guy who's looking her up and down as a predator. So you're getting different ways that she's viewing things. And this is more than just a moment of, oh my God, I'm just super pretty. This is totally a moment of violence against women. It was just one of those things like when I first read it, I was like, can we just can men just stop looking at women up and down all the time at Selena?
Yeah.
But yes, I think it's all of the above. And Selena's pride is pretty big, despite having been enslaved for the past year. Quote, she hadn't spent 8 years building a reputation and a year laboring in Endovier to be disregarded like this. If I had to call myself a jewel thief again, our girl, lover, she has a lot of pride. However, I feel like her pride is partly a coping mechanism because she has felt so dehumanized throughout her whole life, like before she was even in Endovier. But it's also very Selena of her. Like she is a very complicated person. And, I think when people read this book for the first time, they think, ooh, she's just a sassy, stabby girl. She's putting on such a intense front, but at the same time, I think there is a lot of real pride. So what pride is real pride? What pride is not pride? It's like, I think I've said this before. I use humor to cope. I'm also just funny. So it's what's happening. You'll never know.
Both can be true.
Right? More quotes to show her pride. Do you know how insulting it is to pretend to be some nobody thief from a small city in Fenharrow? He stared her down, quiet for a moment. Are you that arrogant? She's already insulted by that. It's like that she's a jewel thief, but from a small town? Ew, like no one will take me seriously. And Kale is shocked about her own arrogance. But remember, there's a lot of reasons why someone would have a lot of pride, a lot of ego, there's levels.
What we learn at the end of the scene is the fact that Kale has a plan. Kale has a plan that you have to be undercover. You have to not be the focus of anybody's attention and be mediocre so that you're never a threat to anybody. You're never at the bottom, but you're never at the top. So nobody takes you out before the end of the competition. And Selena acts like she never thought of it herself. And Kale kind of calls her a pretty little girl in response, like, oh, just sit there and look pretty. It's not what he says, but that's kind of the spirit of it. And the reason why Selena was never capable of thinking up that plot line, that,
plan
strategy,
is
Yeah, it's because it's so counterintuitive to her pride, whether that's her
Mm-hmm.
coping pride or her real pride. Why they have the exchange and why they have it here is I think that when Cale reveals his plan, Selena starts to show respect for him. Oh, like you can fight. Oh, you do have a brain.
And to continue that quote, just kind of like what you were referencing at the end of the scene, quote, he have turned to the other champions. Is anyone staring at you? Are any of them sizing you up? No, because you're not real competition, because you don't stand between them and whatever freedom or wealth they're looking for. Exactly. It's insulting. It's smart. That's what it is. And you're going to keep a low profile throughout the entire competition. Like I mean there's only so many times we can keep saying ego, pride, but she's not a genius strategist. She's not this I am Selena's Sardathian like assassin extraordinaire. She is very naive. She does not understand something that makes sense, and she probably should have, and we're going to see her fall into her own ego and her own weakness, really.
I love that you point that out because we have to believe this right now. We have to believe that she's not capable of that reasonable thinking and strategic thinking because we also have to believe that she's capable of being betrayed and not seeing it coming and not figuring out who it was. Because that's also part of her story, right? And how she ended up in Endovier. And so we have to understand and believe that naivete because if she were any more rational or any more strategic, she would not have ended up where she ended up, and that's Endovier.
Yep, exactly.
So all the competitors are taken outside for a run so that Brullo can judge their physical fitness. Some of the champions remain in their manacles while they run. Selena clocks it and supposes, quote, it was a privilege that Cale hadn't locked her up, too. I guess this is tongue-in-cheek. It might be genuine. I'm not quite sure, but what I do know is that being free should not be considered a privilege. Not being in manacles should not be considered a privilege. It just feels like a right. We, as readers, nor Selena, can forget the fact that Selena is still metaphorically trapped and chained. Her manacles are just not visible. In the end, she is no different from Grave or the other chained champions who were removed from prison this challenge. She just has the manacles of Lady Lillian and being a jewel thief.
Her manacles is her title and her gender.
Yes, those are her manacles. Now, through the Marxist lens, I can't ignore the use of animal descriptions or imagery. While the group goes on their run, Selena observes the other competitors and describes them in this way. Quote, like a flock of birds, they, the other champions, followed Cain. I appreciated the use of birds instead of sheep, because that's essentially what they are, right? Cain is the big bully and everyone else are the sheep following him. But in this case, SJM has chosen the use of the word birds. What are also birds? They're game. They're what aristocrats release so that they can go hunt them in their very controlled environments. And that's what these competitors
all are. Yeah, good point. Good point.
Thanks. They are literal game for the aristocrats to hunt and use for entertainment. The question, though, is Cain game? Or is he something else entirely? Is he in his own category since he's leading this flock of birds? We don't know yet. During the run, Selena realizes just how out of shape she is. Now, we all know she's weak. We've been pointing it out. We will continue to point it out. However, I do feel like, after seeing the other competitors in chains, this run is like a metaphor for her life in Endovier up until now. Quote, Selena's only response was to keep her feet moving. Years of training with Arobin Hamel had taught her the dangers of giving up too easily. Then she was through the trees, and the open field surrounded her in an explosion of space and grass and blue sky. Why I think this is a metaphor is because we saw that no matter how hard it was in Endovier, Selena did not give up. And now she's kind of exploded into this big, wide open space of false freedom. She's no longer a slave. She's gotten through the hard stuff and she gets to enjoy some freedoms again. However, I do think that there is also an unspoken warning in this metaphor that despite the sudden appearance of freedom she seems to have by leaving Endovier, Selena has to keep moving and stay alert because this freedom is a fallacy. Like, this is just another step in the I have to keep going. I have to keep going. And honestly, she's going to keep going for 7 or 8 books. And then she will be done.
And we can assume she's probably still going.
Yeah, probably.
After the run, Selena gets sick, but she excuses herself in order to be sick. Quote, I dropped my ring back there, she lied, doing her best to look scatterbrained. Just give me a moment to find it. Without waiting for his approval, she entered the trees to the sneers and snickers of the champions who had overheard. I find this to be particularly interesting, not just because she's hiding her vulnerability. It's the fact that she's sick because of how tired and exhausted she is, right? But she's using the excuse of having lost a ring, something that would be associated very much so with femininity. So she's pretty, she's dainty, she has jewelry, and I lost my jewelry. It's very Kim Kardashian, earring lost in the ocean, and it's Kim, there's people dying or something like that, right? But she chooses to let the men believe that. She chooses to let them think that she's just a dainty woman looking for a ring and letting them laugh at her for that, rather than showing her own weakness. Which means, if A equals B and B equals C, she does not view femininity as a weakness. She views weakness as weakness.
Right. I think that is core to who Selena and Aelin are. Femininity is not weak. It is a guise or a disguise for power.
Yeah.
And she leans into this idea that people view women or the feminine as weak because it gives her the cover she's comfortable with as an assassin. It's her cover of darkness, right? It makes her the sleeper agent. On the flip side, we can also view this moment from the Marxist lens. And while Selena was ultimately able to do what Kale suggested, which was be kind of in the middle of all your competitors, it's her pride that prevents her from allowing this weakness to be shown. She doesn't want to be vulnerable. She doesn't want to be viewed as weak. She doesn't care if she's viewed as feminine, but she does care about being viewed as weak. At some level, we all understand Kale knows what's going on. The question is, because he's so silent on it, is does he respect her for hiding her weakness, or does he doubt her because of her weakness? And I can't, at this moment, decide what he thinks. But I have to raise that question because there are a lot of moments where he stays silent and you don't know if he's just being respectful or if he's hiding disdain or some other feelings.
I always interpret it as being respectful and respecting her. I think he respects her more when she's not putting on airs.
Yeah, well, and I also feel like, and this is, I'm going to say heteronormative things that I do not necessarily agree with, but I think it is a very masculine trait to not make a big deal about the fact that you threw up.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And he identifies with that. You're weak. You have this outcome. Don't talk about it. Let's move on.
Yeah.
That feels like a very masculine thing, and that feels something where they're both aligned. And I do ultimately agree with you. I do think he respects her because she puts on airs so many other times. For her to not put on airs in this moment, he can see how they are similar.
But it's almost like, wait a minute, but even like, I like your train of thought here. She's putting on airs, you could say, because she's putting on that masculine armor of I'm going to throw up and not complain about it. And what he's actually respecting is her presumed masculinity of I'm going to take this like a champ and not show anyone that I'm weak, when maybe that's not what Selena would do if she wasn't surrounded by competition and people who would kill her.
Right.
So this could be then viewed as Kale finding a connection to Selena that's not a real Selena moment. And
AKA the male gaze.
AKA the male gaze, AKA Kale's going to have a hard time when she becomes her own person. Or he realizes that she was always her own person.
Yep. And that he did not have control. After running, we're now in chapter 13. It is not surprising that our girl Selena is hungry. Because
that'll be me after recording.
I was hungry after working out this morning, and I still haven't eaten. So I will be hungry after this as well. Despite what I said earlier.
Sushi. That's not what Selena eats, though.
No, she does not eat sushi. Quote, to say that Selena was hungry would be a severe understatement. She was halfway through her meal, shoveling meat and bread down her throat when the dining room door opened. Here we see Selena trying to recover her physical strength and, in my mind, proverbial power. She is in desperate need of it, not only obviously to replenish her physical body after working out, but she's also been very vulnerable mentally over the course of this morning, or AKA the past 2 chapters. The act of eating is not only restoring her body, it is restoring her mentally. And I think that's important that we have to see her power on both planes.
And then when Kale joins Selena, he's bathed and clean and he's changed clothes, unlike Selena, who hasn't changed out of her dirty training gear and she's just going in to eat. And this is a choice because Selena has chosen fuel while Kale has chosen aesthetic, which is a type of role reversal with them.
It's again Selena taking on kind of the masculine.
While they're eating, Kale critiques her, quote, "You might fight well, but your manners are a disgrace." She waited for him to mention her earlier vomiting, but he didn't continue. "I can act and talk like a lady if it pleases me. Then I suggest that you begin to do so." Acting like this is a choice. Like what she's doing, she's saying, "I can act and talk like a lady if I please," implying that this is almost like her baseline setting, like, and this is another way, like, I can act like that if I need to. Or we can also say that she's choosing to act like this as well. I think there's a lot of combination. Like we said, there's still a lot of princess in her. There's still a lot of her upbringing of how to be a master spy. And so why is she not acting like a lady? Does it remind her of her childhood? Or does it add an element that she doesn't want to put on? Like, does she just not want to do that extra effort in this moment? And Kale can see the strength of that, even though he's criticizing her.
Yeah, he just likes to criticize her because if we agree that he respects her for putting on the masculine because it's like him, he's now critiquing her for not putting on the feminine.
Because he got dressed and showered and she didn't.
Which he did. And so he has to kind of find equilibrium with her. But I actually think Selena acting this way right now, this maintaining the masculine, is a response to how vulnerable she felt, right?
Yeah.
Being dismissed for being a woman, seeing physical violence towards women present in other competitors. Like, it is safer to be masculine right now.
Well, I mean, and she literally, like, she's making up for what she's ashamed of. She emptied her stomach and she's ashamed of it. It represented her weakness. She's out of shape. So it's immediately fixing it, right? Well, my stomach was never empty. I'm eating a bunch of food right now. It's fine. That never happened.
I agree. This scene ends, and in the next scene, it is the next day. Kale walks into Selena's bedroom, and lo and behold, instead of being asleep, she's training. She has not repeated the error of staying up late reading. Quote, she'd been exercising for an hour already. Her arms quivered as she lifted herself again. Though she might pretend to be in the middle of the pack, there was no reason to train like it. It definitely had nothing to do with her fellow competitors walloping her at the race yesterday. She already had an edge on them. She just needed it to be a bit sharper. This is what Kale expected of Selena. This is the Selena Kale expected to see, and that's why at the end of the scene, he's going to smile at her. She is able to justify his respect because she's able to meet his expectations, which really, again, is about matching his masculinity. Anyway, what's more important about this quote to me is that Selena herself views her own body as a weapon. It has to be sharper. While in Endovier, her body dulled and rusted. Was it still usable? Sure. But she now has the capacity, the time, and the tools to be resharpened and honed. And quite frankly, she's willing to do it because she takes pride in her ability to be a weapon, to be a great weapon. And that's what she wants to be.
Can we even believe what she said too? Like, that's another thing where she was saying, like, I'm just because I'm middle of the pack doesn't mean I have to train like one. She recognizes there's a certain level of like, ooh, shit, maybe I'm not great. And she says that it had nothing to do with her fellow competitors walloping her at the race. You write that in a book, usually explicitly kind of having saying, well, that's exactly what it has to do, right? There's a
Exactly.
contrary. It's like when you read a book of saying, well, I definitely didn't check out that guy. Well, you definitely did check out that guy.
Yep. Yep.
And so I think we can take that as saying, like, she knows for a fact they kicked her ass,
Mm-hmm.
and her saying, well, I'm a weapon. I just need to be, I already have an edge. I just need to be sharper. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the two contradicting moments here where it's like, no, she actually isn't even, does she even have an edge? Not really.
Not really. Her edge is concealing the truth. The edge is that she's not really a jewel thief, she's really an assassin. But that does not inherently make her stronger than everybody else.
And also, you know, even if she was the greatest assassin, she's 18. People are going to have more experience than you. And, you know, you could be as fit and as skilled. Years of experience will have an advantage.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Selena's dress choice following her training that day. Quote, she was glad to be out of her rooms and dressed in one of her new gowns, a lovely lilac silk dress with pale pink lace accents and pearl beading. It's such a stark contrast of who we were getting before, you know, this hyper masculine persona. I mean, again, like we're using very loose terms here. It does not represent how we view gender. But we have this, you know, masculine, I'm going to throw up, not say anything, I'm going to shove food down my throat. And she says, I can act and talk like a lady if I want to. Well, here she is acting like a lady. It's that contrast of the morning. It's really jarring because, like, we go from this heavy duty assassin to, oh, we're hyper feminine now with lilac and pink lace. There's that counterbalance. So, why does this contrast feel so jarring? Does this make the reader not sure about her and not trust her? Because I know for me personally, when I first read this, it was for me too jarring. I was not on board with Selena for a while, to be honest, my first read, because I just could not pin her down. And I don't think that women aren't capable of having different aspects about them. We can be multifaceted, but it was just such a stark contrast.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. It's now just dawning on me that this is Selena continuing to push the pedal on the gaslighting of Kale. Kale is the one that was like, why can't you act more like a lady? So what does she do the next day?
Acts
She
like a
puts on
lady.
that dress
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
And so her extreme flip-flopping from the masculine to the feminine and back and forth is her complying with what Kale expects of her,
Yep. You're right.
which could be viewed as gaslighting, right? Because she's being obedient, but at the same time, it could also be her trying to appeal to him because there is that tension between them, and which again contributes to Kale's false sense of control over Selena.
Ooh, nailed it. Nailed it. Whether it's true or not, in our minds, in my mind, you nailed it.
In my mind, it is the only truth.
Yeah, I know. But if you have a different perspective, feel free to email us.
Please always tell us your different perspective.
Or tell us we nailed it. Whatever. You know, do
All
whatever.
right, or give us more examples of why we're right. That's also acceptable.
Yeah, totally.
While Kale and Selena walk around the palace together with Selena in her very pink and purple is very feminine dress, by the way, they happen to stumble upon the Princess Nehemia of Ilway being escorted by Keltane and a random councilman. And let's just say there are a lot of power dynamics going on right now.
I am so fascinated with Nehemia and the way that Selena looks at Nehemia and just their interaction, because it doesn't make sense to me, especially after everything we've been talking about. Quote, she was stunning, long and lean, each of her features perfectly formed and smooth. Her loose white dress contrasted with her creamy brown skin, and a three-plated gold torque covered much of her chest and neck. Bracelets of ivory and gold glimmered around her wrist, and her feet were sandaled beneath matching anklets. A thin circlet comprising dangling gold and jewels crowned her head. She had 2 male guards with her, armed to the teeth, with an assortment of curved Eelway daggers and swords. Both of them studying Kale and Selena closely, weighing the threat. The Eelway girl was a princess. We are now introduced to our first person of color character in Throne of Glass. Main character, you know, the eyeglass, the eye eater guy who was described as having tan skin. Anyway, so our first POC character. And she is wearing a gold torque, gold bracelets, gold anklets, and it shows wealth, but it also shows that she is chained. She is wearing a collar, she is wearing manacles, she is a prisoner just as much as Celaena is. And we're going to see how much of a prisoner she really is. And immediately, why does Celaena not view her as a threat the way that she did with Kaltain? This is a fellow princess. In theory, this would be the most threatening woman to her, right? That's because there is power in title and reputation. And remember that Celaena's upset that she is not known as the famed assassin. So she respects title, she respects the power. Quote, she had often heard the Elway slaves in Endovier boast of Nehemia's beauty and bravery. Nehemia, the light of Ilwe, who would save them from their plight. Nehemia, who might someday pose a threat to the king of Ardalan's rule and over her home country when she ascended to the throne. So Celaena not only views Nehemia as an equal, but I think she views her as someone that she can aspire to rather than a threat. If anything, I feel like Celaena is not threatened, but rather might be put off because Nehemia is the princess who is fighting for her people when Celaena is not.
If anything, it's more cause for Celaena to have respect for Nehemia because she is doing what Celaena is not. I mean, it could be a source of jealousy, it could be a source of anger or shame, but I think what Celaena is choosing is respect. And I think it is because of her experience in Endovier. She felt the respect the people had for Nehemia, and she now vicariously has that same respect.
Yeah.
That deep respect is also reflected in the fact that Celaena curtsies as low as she possibly can and chooses to speak to Nehemia in the Ilwe language, which no one else bothers to do or is capable of doing.
Yeah, immediately we see that Nehemia is classified as quote unquote other here. And that's a concept that we see often in literature. Other is other. I know that's like, groundbreaking description there, but a lot of times it's people of color, a lot of times it's women. It's just anything that is not white men, essentially. And we see that she is a foreign person of color, a woman in charge, everything that they do not like here, right? We've already established that this is a very white, violent against women kingdom here, but she does not lose her power. And between her and Celaena, they're going to find power in language. So even though she's being kind of paraded around in this dress that's not hers and these chains and these, everything, there is power in language. And when Kaltain corrects her on the use of talking with the weather versus talking about the weather, it's viewed as a slight. In the moment, it's meant to be like, wow, she is being so disrespectful. And Celaena is even like, you shut your face up right there. Anyway, the power of language in the representation of what other is so important here because both Celaena and Nehemia are other, except no one knows that Celaena is other. No one knows that, but she identifies with it. Nehemia is everything that Celaena can't be as a princess, like we were saying. She asks, quote, what do you make of the castle? And then Nehemia says, it's the most foolish thing I've ever seen. She sees how ostentatious the castle is, how it's peacocking. And this is a princess that Celaena can just say it. Like what she says has value. She is another foreign entity, a royal foreign entity who can say this palace is stupid because she has one versus Celaena, just an assassin saying this palace is stupid does not have the same effect.
I think that's a good point. So I'd have to give credit to Celaena in this scene because she could treat Nehemia the way she treats Kaltain if she wanted to. I think it goes back to what I was saying about Celaena, who worked side by side with other Ilwe slaves, was able to develop respect for Nehemia because of rumors. And that is also questionable, right? Her respect is based off of rumors. Nevertheless, because the Ilwe slaves respected their princess, therefore Celaena does as well. Furthermore, if the rumors are true, if Nehemia is a rebel, is a warrior, that means, like Jac was saying, she's not a petty courtier. She is physically powerful, and that's what Celaena respects. Now, whether or not that's the right reason to respect Nehemia, ultimately, Celaena treats her well, unlike everybody else. Nehemia is treated like a farm animal who is quote unquote herded about. And it's not even herded about by the prince. It's not herded about by anybody important. It's just some random female courtier and a random councilman. Now, and I don't say that to be mean to Keltane. It's
No,
just
you're right. You're right.
it's the truth.
Say
She's
the
from
truth. Call it what it is.
We learn from Keltane's perspective some other time. She's not from one of the most noble families. She's from like a lower noble family. So that's even more disrespectful to Nehemia, ultimately. It shows what Aderlin thinks of Ilwe, its people, and its royalty, that they are not deserving of respect and they are treated like farm animals. Now, Keltane correcting Nehemia about her use of the language and telling her the correct preposition or whatever it is that she should use, yes, is about Keltane trying to regain some control because Nehemia and Selena are speaking in a different language that she doesn't understand. I get it. Nehemia likewise calls Keltane this one. Not a human, not this girl, just this one. Like nondescript, no species associated with it. And I think Nehemia is disrespectful to Keltane, not because Keltane really did anything wrong, but because it's the only way Nehemia can gain control of the situation when she's a prisoner in a country where she barely can speak the language. However, I do think that Nehemia's disrespect towards Keltane makes Selena think Nehemia is therefore an ally in hatred against Keltane, which I don't like.
I hate it. They're both mean girls right now.
They are both mean girls. So I just pointed out because there's a lot of dynamics going on here, even though it's like a 2 or 3 page encounter, and not all of it is positive. Some of it is, some of it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to make Keltane shit, then make her more racist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be like, Keltane sucks, this is a great opportunity. And some people might say, yes, this is racism. You know, we're seeing some of it here.
Yeah.
It's... as someone who's seen it, experienced it in different ways, and I'm sure the same thing is with you, Amy. For new listeners, Amy's half Chinese, I'm half Chilean, despite, well, we don't look anyway. But like we've seen, like there's been a lot of experience with it. So like maybe some people might look at this and say, well, Keltane is being super racist.
Yeah, I mean, could you describe her actions as a microaggression? Sure, you could.
Yeah.
At the same time, these are a bunch of 18-year-olds.
Why must you remind me every time? Because you're right. Like, they're in their 20s, late 20s. Yeah, you're right. They're 18. They're kids.
Yeah, I mean, they're children. This is how high schoolers act. It's to be expected. Not that it's okay.
No, but it is to be expected. It is in behavior of the youth. And thank God I'm not in high school.
Yeah, seriously.
So what makes Nehemia different? Quote, Nehemia chewed on the words and then looked at Selena, brows high, as if she'd expected a translation by now. A smile tugged on the corners of Selena's lips. No wonder the councilman was sweating so profusely. Nehemia was a force to be reckoned with. Selena translated Kale's question with ease. Selena isn't threatened by her. Selena's not put off with the attitude of, well, why aren't you doing this for me? Because that's what it is. There's an entitlement. Nehemia, she's entitled. She has this attitude. It doesn't matter that she's a princess fighting for her people. That is an entitled ass moment to say, well, why aren't you just doing this for me? So why do we like Nehemia more than we like other people? Because I don't feel like Nehemia is giving off positive vibes at this personal moment. And why do we like these women? Like we were saying, they are mean girls. Quote, get rid of her, she said flatly to Selena, then waved a hand towards Keltane. I don't care for her temperament. You're dismissed, Selena said to Keltane, flashing a bright smile. The princess tires of your company. Nehemia is equally rude like Selena, and it's an sense of an entitlement that comes with royalty. They are two princesses who are acting like princesses, and they get to have a common enemy, even though the common... Okay, let me rant. Where's my mic? Okay.
I need popcorn.
The common enemy here is a fucking man. Sorry, I try not to curse. The common enemy is the fucking king. It is a man. It is a man who has positioned all of these women against each other. Even though Dorian, who is another man, brought in Selena, is positioning these women, these little pawns, and these women are going after each other when the main one to get is the king. All right, I'm not happy. but it's good. You know what I mean? I'm happy because I'm mad.
So I know we said death to the author beforehand, the concept of death to the author, but this to me is like, this is a product of a young author,
Yeah.
right? I think if SJM of today wrote this, these three characters and how they interact would be very different.
Yeah.
I do think it is also easier for us as readers to feel empathetic towards Nehemia because she fits a trope. She is a woman of color who is captive.
Oh, I was just saying that's the reason why I don't hate her is like, well, you're a woman of color who's captive. Like that's not
Yeah.
a good feeling. That sucks.
Yeah. And it's easier for us to identify not with Nehemia, but empathy for Nehemia over anybody else.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume that's also true for Selena.
Yeah.
She isn't capable of seeing Keltane for who she really is, but Selena is capable of seeing Nehemia for who she really is.
Yes.
And that's why she does not struggle with the way Nehemia acts or treats her.
Yeah. Good call. Good call. Calm me down. Take me off the edge. The ledge.
Also, Nehemia is a bully just like Selena.
Such a bully. Such a fucking bully. I hope you all feel like shit later. Which they will.
Not the listener, but the characters.
Yeah, not you guys. You guys are perfect. You're amazing. Keep listening, sweet baby angels.
During this exchange, just a friendly reminder, Kale is with Selena at this moment. And Kale interferes between Nehemia and Selena, just like Keltane did. Quote, "Your Highness," Kale said, stepping forward, a subtle movement to keep himself between Nehemia and Selena. Now, we are in Selena's point of view, and we can tell from this description that Kale is being viewed as a threat that is coming between Nehemia and Selena. Just like Keltane is a threat to Nehemia, Kale is a threat to Nehemia and Selena. And to me, that's just through the description of the movement. I think that that's implied for a reason, just because of how we know the story is going to continue to progress between these three characters. And it signals for us that, yes, Selena is seeing Nehemia for what she is, which is a kindred spirit, a princess trapped in a glass castle. I think this is reinforced when Selena shakes hands with Nehemia and observes, quote, "Her fingers were surprisingly calloused in all the spots where the hilt of a sword or a dagger might rest." Now, if she were a true princess, a princess would have soft hands free of signs from labor. That is what it means to be noble and royal, at least in our Western perspective of what it means to be royal. Instead, what Selena is observing is signs of a warrior, and she recognizes the warrior in Nehemia because Selena herself is a warrior as well. This is just reinforcing this idea that they're kindred spirits, that no matter how Nehemia might treat Selena or how entitled Nehemia might be, ultimately at the end of the day, they are the same.
We're, still going into this Kale being there, and is he a threat or is he an ally? Let's look at this quote. "Though his features were a mask of protocol, she could have sworn she glimpsed a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Selena wanted to hug him." This amusement is off of Keltane's expense. And once again, Selena is finding allies and men who see Keltane as a common enemy. Hashtag leave Keltane alone. I don't know.
Yeah. You can't see me shake my head, but I'm shaking my head.
yeah. That silence there is Amy's disapproval.
That's right. Now, as it should, seeing Nehemia brings up memories of Endovier for Selena, especially when Selena is asked whether she keeps slaves. Selena responds, quote, "I don't believe in keeping slaves." Something twisted in her gut at the thought of all those slaves she'd left behind in Endovier, all those people doomed to suffer until they died. Just because she'd left Endovier didn't mean Endovier had ceased to be. Now, this is absolutely correct. And Endovier will stay with Selena throughout the series. But what's problematic to me about this, and maybe this is the only way to incorporate it into the book, but it is often that Endovier only comes up and the slaves in Endovier only come up when Selena is visually reminded of someone who looks like a slave from Endovier. In all other instances, the Eelway slaves are out of sight, out of mind for Selena. And like I said, when it comes to writing, I recognize that there's only so much you can fit on a page. But if I were writing Selena and she was really to struggle with this idea that she's left behind a bunch of people unfairly enslaved in Endovier, she would wrestle with that more in moments that are just plain moments, in moments where there aren't people like Nehemia in front of her. Jac is raising her hand.
I have a comment. Thank you
Yes.
for picking me. To your point, because I freaking agree to the umpteenth degree. Here is a moment where you could have added that, because it's hard when you have only so many so many words in a book. When you could have had her still not sleeping in a bed. You could have had her just say she looked at her bed guiltily. She looked at her bed. You don't have to do much to, drill in a point. It can be subtle. And the fact that we called out saying, oh, look, she's in the bed, she's healing and stuff. I actually thought that was and I still think it's a wasted moment of showing that she does have this struggle with the slaves in Endovier, and that they aren't just a convenient, oh my God, someone looks like they might be a slave from Endovier, who, as we've established here, is a person of color. So now I feel bad. I'm one of you.
Yeah.
That's not how that works.
Yeah. And, as the text is written right now, it comes across to me just in this book, in this moment in this book. Yeah. In this moment in this book, it comes across to me that Selena is happy to pretend Endovier didn't happen if she can avoid thinking about it. She enjoys the finer things. She's adapting to comfort, and she only thinks to lament the people she left behind when she is forced to acknowledge that part of her journey, their existence, their presence.
And, there's two ways of looking at it. You can look at it as like, this is survivor's guilt, and she struggles with survivor's guilt. She doesn't know how to process and cope with it. I truly do believe that this is, like you said, a sign of a young author who doesn't know how to incorporate it in more subtle but consistent ways.
Yeah, I agree.
And we see that better in books like Wings and Ruin and in books like Crescent City. So I do want to point out that, this is one of those moments where SJM does much better with PTSD and reminding us of that in future different books.
I mean, this is her first book, so it makes sense. Yeah. She does it better in her later series.
At one point, Nehemia says, quote, "You don't need to bother calling me that." The princess toyed with one of her gold bracelets around her wrists. And that being Your Majesty, Your Highness. And it's a contrast of not wanting to be called Your Highness. However, she is acting like one. It's, oh, you don't need to call me Your Highness, but translate for me.
I think it's a comment about how she doesn't have power here.
Okay.
There's no power in her title.
Yeah. Oh, I like that one much more. Let's do that. And so at this point now, they're talking about Dorian, and Nehemia says about him, quote, "That pretty boy, he grinned at me far too much, and you should only see how he winked at the other women in the court. I want a husband to warm my bed, and my bed alone." She glanced sidelong at the assassin, giving her another head-to-toe examination. I mean, there's a whole you're pitting women against each other over a stupid boy. Granted, supposedly a really hot stupid boy, but stupid
nonetheless. Who is a bit of a player. And now Selena is the one who is viewed as a threat, right? Selena's been the one who's looked at other women, kind of judged other women for being interested in Dorian. And that's now been put on her, even though she's not necessarily interested in him. What is the difference between this dynamic that we're getting between Nehemia towards Selena versus Selena towards Kaltain? Kaltain had an interest in Dorian, and in theory, Selena doesn't care. And yet, suddenly, she does care. What do you mean you might like Dorian? You're flirting with the prince. Oh, we're going to have a threesome with him and Kale. That was literally implied. Versus now, it's you have Nehemia who's just saying, unless you like him, essentially with her eyes. And Selena doesn't give any of the fucks. I guess I interpreted it as we learn that Selena is very attracted to Dorian. And it's easier to hate a woman if she likes the guy you like or is attracted to the guy you're attracted to. And it's easier to like a woman who has no interest in the guy that you're interested in. That's the female experience.
It is. God, what would have happened if we ever liked the same guy? Would have been rare. Very Amy's engaged to a woman. Let's just put that.
We both like Raven, you.
We did. Thank God he's not a real person.
Yeah. There would have been bloodshed.
God, I mean, talk about characters that would have, like, a character that would have zero interest in either of us, personality-wise.
It's so true.
I say that to both of us, not just...
I understand. Nehemiah tells Selena about how books were burned in Eelway, just like they were in Terrasen. Quote, something cold and bitter glittered in Nehemiah's eyes. Now, most of the books we receive are from Aderlin, books in a language I can barely understand. That's also what I must learn while I'm here. If knowledge is power, and the conquering nation, Aderlin, systematically destroys access to knowledge and replaces it with their version, the native people, the Eelway, become powerless. We've seen this in our own history.
Mm-hmm.
I've personally witnessed it in the country I grew up in, and we see it in a lot of SGM's writings, including Crescent City. Without saying Aderlin is bad, we know Aderlin is bad.
Yeah.
We cannot trust a ruler, the king, who allows this kind of thing to happen, that conquers a nation and replaces its knowledge with his own, essentially. I think the reason for this conversation to exist is because it helps us as readers better understand Selena's conflict and what it really means for her to become the king's champion. That her home was destroyed just like Nehemiah's, and she is subjecting herself to a situation where she's essentially a slave to this king.
It's also like one of my favorite right now we're looking at it through the feminist lens and the Marxist lens, but one of my other favorite lenses that I learned in college was post-colonial lens. I really enjoyed looking at things through a post-colonial lens. It initially started with reading literature that came out of countries after British and other colonizers had left. And those are very interesting books to read. But then the post-colonial lens has grown to this any kind of lens of viewing things of once the power has taken over, that's the colonial lens. And then post-colonial is once the power has left. It's just, I feel like if we were to dabble in other lenses, this would be a great colonial / eventually post-colonial lens.
Yeah. I think that's a great suggestion. It's not often, I think, that we get to enjoy the post-colonialism in a fantasy setting.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially in this series. However, I also think, yes, it could have very interesting themes.
Absolutely. Now we're going to talk about some clothes. Nehemiah says, quote, and I hate these shoes and this miserable dress. I don't care if it's Eelway silk and I'm supposed to be representing my kingdom. The material's been itching me ever since I put it on. She stared at Selena's elaborate gown. How can you stand wearing that enormous thing? Selena picked at the skirts of her dress. It breaks my ribs, to be honest. It's more proof of the metaphorical chains that we were talking about and the fact that Nehemiah hates it here. I think that it speaks volumes that this is a dress that Selena earlier talked about loving, feeling refreshed to wear this dress. She's talked about loving these pretty things. And rather than defending herself or defending this dress of saying, you know what, I actually really like it, she leans into what Nehemiah is saying and goes, well, it breaks my ribs too. And that could be true. But earlier in this chapter, she was just, oh my God, my dress is awesome.
This is what makes Selena multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
And someone might argue poorly written. I'm going to argue multifaceted. And that's not a
That's
slight,
such a good point. Yeah, no, but that's a good point. That's a good freaking point. People a lot of times will argue this is a shitty character and it's like, actually they're multifaceted, but like continue.
Yeah. I mean, just like Selena, in my view, chose to wear a dress after training because yesterday Kale critiqued her for not being more ladylike after training. Selena could also be like, yeah, it was more comfortable to wear training clothing and lean into what Nehemiah's viewpoint is.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Selena is at an age where it's easier to adapt yourself to what people want you to be instead of being who you truly are. Because at the end of the day, Selena is hiding who she truly is. Her only goal is to disguise herself so that she can't be found. And so choosing to act or agree with everyone around her is a method of disguise.
A method of survival. I mean,
Yeah.
not only is this very common for when you're young and you're still trying to figure out who you are, so you kind of adapt and you're a chameleon to everyone around you. Eventually, in theory, you become who you are and you're more comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
That is all true, and that is a product of youth. To your point, it is a product of survival. It is a product of her having to say, no one can know what I am. No one can know that she is not just the princess, that she is Fae, right? Do we know that
Mm-hmm.
by book 3? That she is a Fae
We do know that
princess.
book. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If Nehemia is other, Selena is other too. You know, she's not even human. She's not even part of like this race with everyone else here. So she has to adapt to every single person. She has to be an assassin. She's going to be the best freaking assassin. She has to
Mm-hmm.
be a champion. She's going to be a champion. She has to be pretty. I'm going to be pretty. You don't like this dress? I don't like this dress either.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And that's how we save books. That's well, it's just like, you know, people dismiss things very quickly. And I think there's layers to it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Now, speaking of layers, this is one of those layers that is very much worth talking about. And we'll mention a little bit in the breadcrumbs, but let's look at this quote. She never had many friends. The ones that she had often disappointed her. Sometimes devastating consequences. She'd learned that summer with the silent assassins of the Red Desert. After that, she'd sworn never to trust girls again, especially girls with agendas and power of their own, girls who would do anything to get what they wanted. But as the door closed behind the ivory train of the Eelway princess, Selena wondered if she'd been wrong. Like I said, we'll get into that into the breadcrumb section, but the sentiment is important for us to understand right now. And it's a messy sentiment, but I also understand that this might be something that a lot of women can connect to, a lot of young women can connect to. You know, the amount of times I've heard, I don't really like girls, they're just full of drama. And that's always like my red flag where I'm like, you said that that was used to be you back in the day. That was always like my red flag of like, if someone is like, I don't like girls, they're drama. I'm like, what? No, however, you know, look at you, you're perfect. You're stuck with me. And I think that it's hard because sometimes people have one bad female relationship and therefore they feel like they can't trust women in general, even though that concept doesn't always necessarily extend to men. Just because they can't trust a man doesn't mean that people don't try to find love again. You know, some do, some don't. I'm making very general statements here. I'm happy that we're getting at the start of this book, this concept of female friendship. It's a concept that SJM, I personally think, struggles in her writing. I don't think that the concept and depiction of female friendship is the most natural to her. I think it's something that she usually has to work towards. And even with this dynamic, I'm happy that we're getting it early on. I need it to prove true to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember when I was reading this series that I did feel like she did female friendship more. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but she tried hard and I felt like she did a decent job later on in the series.
And that's the point, later on. It's the same thing with Akatar. She does it well later on when you get Nesta and Co. And, you know, you and I have argued, we've only analyzed the first 2 books of Crescent City, but we've argued that she actually, even though we start with Danica, doesn't really do a great job of depicting female friendships. So this is something that she works on and gets to, but struggles a little bit in the beginning. So I'll definitely be looking more into this relationship as the book continues.
We then transition into Cale's point of view, and this is the first time we're seeing the world through his eyes. Now, it starts out with a good old-fashioned food is power moment. Quote, her mouth was full of food. Would she never stop eating? She ate more than anyone he knew, including his guards. She had multiple helpings of every course at each meal. First off, Cale should not be judging a woman for their eating habits, especially Selena's. She was malnourished for a year.
I know. And she works out a lot.
Yeah, seriously. Additionally, his remark on Selena's eating habits demonstrates for us as readers what we really should see in Selena, which is inner strength. It's a strength she's harnessing, that she's working on, but we just haven't been able to see yet. We also have to remember it's an improvement from when she could hardly eat after first leaving Endovier, symbolizing she's growing, her strength is growing through her training, and hopefully it's a good sign for the future.
I want to look into this with the feminist lens. Quote, Kale Westfald watched the assassin eat lunch, her eyes darting from one plate to the next. She had immediately stripped from her gown upon entering her rooms and now sat in a rose and jade dressing robe that suited her well. So this is the very first sentence in the Kale point of view, and it's the first time we get that Kale point of view, and it's the first thing that he notices is it's a good robe on her. It looks good on her. And you're starting to get this idea that food and sex are a little bit related. Now, even though he says something like, she eats more than my soldiers, she also eats sausages. So it's a sexy food. It's it's not, what do they call it? Sexy.
Phallic.
It's a phallic food. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know if it's sexy, but it's, we've already established this. I think chocolate croissants are the sexiest of foods. But it's, like a sausage, like there's going to be a lot of connection there. Now into this other quote. And what's wrong with headstrong girls, she pressed, other than the fact that they're not wooden-headed ninnies who can only open their mouths to give orders and gossip? I just prefer a certain type of woman. Thankfully, it was the right thing to say because she batted her eyelashes. And what type of woman is that? Not an arrogant assassin. She's trying to get into Kale's graces. She just wants him to pick her, to find that something to find her attractive, right? And she did the whole court gossip ninny thing earlier, mind you. And there's an unspoken difference between girls and women in what Kale is saying. So while Nehemia and Selena are young women, and they're certainly not girls, how do we feel about Kale's definition here?
I think for me, it was more about to him, there are girls and women. And quite frankly, I think he classifies Selena as a girl right now. She is a headstrong girl.
Yeah. And I agree because Selena is still removing herself and seeing herself as superior from the quote unquote wooden-headed ninnies who only open their mouth to give orders and gossip. She only sees herself as that and better than them. What makes you better than them? What was different than Nehemia earlier giving her orders, them talking about court, hating their dresses and stuff and not liking Keltane? There's not much of a difference. And I think Kale is right in that there is a difference between girls and women. And right now, Selena's acting like a petty girl.
Yeah. I just don't know that I like the messaging coming from Kale.
No, I agree. No, a man shouldn't be telling me that.
You don't get to have a differentiation between girls and women. I get to have a differentiation between girls and women.
No, I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
That
Agreed.
was my point.
That was a good one. All right, now for this next quote. He sometimes felt that she looked at him in a way a cat regards a mouse. He wondered how long it would take for her to pounce. She shrugged and took a bite from an apple. There was something girlish about her, too. Oh, he couldn't understand her contradictions. Whenever I see apple and I see kind of sex, I always get Adam and Eve concepts, she taking a bite of an apple. There's this temptress. There's this, she's the snake. Come hither, my garden type of thing. Right? Where did I say it like that? Anyway.
I don't know.
Kale is obviously, though, struggling to understand the many facets that is Selena. And he sees power in her, but also views her erroneously as... This is your quote. He also views her very much girlish, and he doesn't like that girlishness there. And he's confusing femininity as weakness. And I think that's a very, that's a very important thing where he struggles with it. He definitely views femininity as weakness, but he also likes it on her too.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But I guess that also kind of makes sense with men in general too, actually. A lot of, not all guys, but some of the shit guys are women suck. I don't femininity. I'm not going to act like a woman. Femininity sucks, but also you must act like it, but then you hate it anyway.
I think the contradiction is really in men, in Kale, because they don't like headstrong women who think for themselves. They don't like girls who gossip, but they like girls and women who depend on them and who are cute and ultra feminine. It's men are the problem.
I saw something on TikTok that was really interesting, and I think about it a lot, is that find a man who likes women, or they like you. Just because a man will be with a woman, married to a woman, doesn't mean he likes them. And how oftentimes men can be with someone that they claim to love, but just not like them. And all these things of what is girlishness, what is feminine, quote unquote femininity. It's an interesting concept. So that's why I go in hard with my flowers, and I just want to say, like my flowers, bitch. And then you get the multifaceted side of me. Amy is squinching her head so much. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. Feminine contradiction. That's all we're saying for this.
Yeah, I think what it is for Kale and for the general enigma that is men, because remember, I'm with a woman, is that it's either I enjoy this person's femininity because I can control it, or I enjoy this person's femininity because, period. Because I just do.
And then you also have femininity versus girlishness, like youthfulness and stuff. Because I've been told I have a very girlish face, like a youthful girlish face. And the amount of times I've had guys, and like we're being cutesy with each other, they're just like, oh, you're just like a little girl, you're just like a little baby. And I get you're being cutesy, but I'm also, you're infantilizing me. And what does that mean when I get older? And is my beauty not going to still be beauty when I'm 50, 60? Because I've seen some 50, 60-year-olds, they're hot as fuck. Looking at you, Mom.
It's just like, are you saying you fuck a baby? Like,
oh my God. Yeah.
Moving away from that topic. We end this scene with an understanding that Kale does not understand, or does he trust Selena. Quote, despite her arrogance, she was clever and relatively kind and somewhat charming. But where was that writhing darkness? Why didn't it show itself so he could just throw her into the dungeon and call off this ridiculous competition? There was something great and deadly concealed within her, and he didn't like it. He'd be ready. When the time came, he'd be waiting. He just wondered which of them would survive. Now, I understand why it is hard for some people to like Kale. Let me just state, I do ultimately like Kale. I like his journey. But in this moment, he does not trust our protagonist because she keeps a lot of secrets, because she's an assassin, because she's killed a lot of people. Okay, that was her job. Just like his job is to kill people, if it comes to that. Now, we see, as the readers, we see the goodness in Selena regardless. We also see the bad, but we see the goodness. And despite Kale being capable of the same, he will always fall on the side of distrust, which I think as readers, I'm going to suggest that we don't. We fall on the side of, we're just going to trust Selena. Whereas Kale is always like, I must distrust. It's bad. Shame on me for trusting her. Kale has doubted Selena from the beginning, and he will continue prioritizing his mistrust of her, his lack of understanding of her. And I think ultimately that is why readers may not like him. I'm also going to argue something that just popped into my head. We've been talking a lot about how Selena is naive. How much of the darkness in Selena is created because of Kale's actions? Because Kale is the one to put it there. Not willingly, not with that intention, but he's looking for something that we don't know to exist, and so he makes it exist. On the flip side, it is his job to be suspicious. It is his job to see threats and take care of them. He's captain of the guard. His sworn duties to protect the kingdom, the king, the prince. Unfortunately, Kale is very black and white in his thinking. And to me, that is what makes his character journey very interesting, is that we take this very, very black and white character who has very, very strict views of the world, who makes mistakes and wrong assumptions and has to come to peace with that and make better decisions.
Sam just finished the whole series. She read it in like a week and a half.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And she was like, I have a lot of thoughts and I don't like Kale. I'm like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I remember when I first listened to the series, I was like, I understand why people don't like Kale, but I don't agree. I think he's misunderstood. I think he's misguided. That does not inherently make him a bad character.
Agreed.
We are finally into chapter 14, and we get a, Rocky style training sequence at the start of the chapter. The training sequence is important as we prepare for the first trial. We have to believe Selena's physical progress, from running and throwing up and barely being able to finish a race to being able to even complete the first trial, not to even speak of all the trials to come. The training sequence is also an opportunity for us to better understand Kale, especially after having had his point of view. We know that he's neither willing to praise Selena for her goodness nor comment on her weakness. It comes across to me that he almost doesn't want to engage with her simply because he wants to avoid her. At the same time, we also understand he's unable to understand her. I think what Kale has come to understand about Selena is that she's not good with silence. She has to fill that silence because she's arrogant. And I think Kale is used to playing the waiting game. He is willing to stay silent and just keep watch to see what she does. And we know that Kale is more strategically minded than Selena is. And that's what's happening here in my mind.
Who Selena hates will speak more to me than the people that she likes. So let's look at Cain. Quote, Cain, how she loathed him. Burlo practically worshipped the man, and even the other champions nodded their respect when he passed by. No one bothered to comment on how perfect her form was. Was this how the other assassins in the Assassin's Keep had felt all those years that she kept hogging Arobin Hamel's attention? Like, it's almost like self-reflection, but not really.
Yeah.
It's such a, like, she's mad that he's getting attention. She's mad that the other people respect him and not her. I mean, like, they're not even necessarily going out of their way to disrespect her. They're just respecting him. Why aren't they noticing my perfect form? And it's a reminder of what her life used to be. She used to be respected. She used to be valued. And Cain is able to live in a way and be respected in a way that she cannot.
And that really irks her. She doesn't like it.
Yep.
During training, Knox Owen introduces himself, even though Selena has already taken note of him and has also noted he is handsome. Quote, his grip was solid, his hand calloused and scarred. He'd seen his fair share of action. This is the second time we've seen Selena judge someone in a positive light because of scars on their hands. She sees their value as symbols of strength and skill. Now, on one hand, it's not surprising because I'm going to assume she has a lot of scars, not just including the ones on her back. I think it's also important to note the fact that she respects scars.
There's a comment that she makes later with Dorian saying, everyone has scars. Some people just have it more visible.
Yes. But I will say who she ends up with in the future also has this big scar. And I think that connection needs to be noted.
I mean, she has a scar in her hand. We're going to get the story about Arobin smashing her hand.
Also true. Pellar comes up at this point. He's a young boy who informs them of Graves' murder. Quote, she'd spent half a day watching Pellar, and while she only pretended to be mediocre, he truly could use the training. Assassin indeed. His voice hadn't even deepened yet. How did he wind up here? I bring this up because Lane is judging. He could also be faking. She doesn't know it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not, but
he survives. He survives this round.
He does survive. Now, on one hand, it does make sense that Selena's taking stock of her opponents, especially as the first trial draws nearer. That's what she should be doing. It's probably ingrained in her as an assassin, trying to ascertain, who's the threat, how to handle them. I'm just pointing out that she's judging.
But Judgy Judgerson, there's a moment when Selena shows off, quote, it sparkled a shooting star of steel. She smiled grimly as it struck home. Behind her, Knox swore colorfully when his dagger hit the third ring on the target, and her smile broadened, despite the shredded corpse that lay somewhere in the castle. Such an interesting thing to throw in there. It's like, I'm happy, even though this other person who ate eyes is shredded somewhere. And it's like, what was that necessary? I think it's meant to show a level of ruthlessness in her, which, like, we get, she's really into her own ability of killing and her own upbringing as an assassin. And she's just proud of herself, even if there's dead people in the castle. Verrin and Cain heckle her, quote, circus tricks ain't much use when you're the king's champion. She shifted her gaze to him, but kept position towards the target. You'd be better off on your back learning tricks useful to a woman. In fact, I can teach you some tonight if you like. He laughed and Cain joined with him. Why is it that insulting women always comes back to sex? It's either threatening of sex or shaming women for enjoying sex. Those are always the two ways that men love to insult women when it comes in general. Just they love it. Her, though, and Knox have a different dynamic. Quote, you've got impressive aim. For a girl, she challenged. No, he said, and threw another dagger. For anyone. Once Knox shows Selena that he views her and values her as an equal and not just a girl, she starts to put more time and effort into him, which I understand and I agree with. Respect people who see you as a human.
Yeah. I interpreted what he was saying as comfort. I think his intent was comfort. Like, ignore them. They're terrible towards women. Like, I'm a good guy, I promise. I see what you're saying as Selena seeing, oh, Knox is finally giving me the validation I've been begging for.
It's both. I think it's like,
I think it's both.
yeah, like he's kind of saying, hey, it's okay. Like I see you as a human. And she's like, thank you, someone. See
Yeah.
that I'm good.
Yeah. And this is where the concept of quid pro quo comes back in. He validated her, and so she's willing to help him get better at his dagger throwing. Now, I think in my mind, from a writing perspective, this moment of teaching is important for balancing out the disgusting comments about women. From a power perspective, Selena is showing her power through teaching a man, right? It's her being powerful, teaching a man. I also choose to interpret this moment, though, despite her need for validation, despite her being very arrogant. She's being magnanimous by teaching Knox how to throw better. She doesn't have to do that. He is competition. She doesn't have to do it just because he said nice things about her. But there is something in her that feels obligated to do so. I think it's important that we see this moment happen, regardless of Selena's intention, because it makes us like her from a writing perspective.
Absolutely. And then as I was reading, I felt all that way. And then I was like, holy shit, it's because he's her subject.
Oh.
Quote. You're from Peranth, right? She asked, though she'd never been to Peranth, Terrason's second largest city. So he's her subject.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of reasons. He treats her with respect. He's, all the, like her own and goodness, but then he is her responsibility.
Yeah. I see it. I don't like it, but I see it.
Okay. You don't like it? Why don't you like it?
No. I mean, I think just the way I first interpreted your point, I understand, like, she's being the kind of ruler you would want. She is beholden to her people. She wants to take care of her people. At first, I was like, she just wanted to find someone who would, like, be her slave. But no, it's her when you said subject, my immediate thought was about power.
Oh, yeah,
right?
no. He's literally her subject. He's literally her responsibility.
Right. Yep.
And you hate it. I'm sorry.
No. I hated it because my first interpretation was about power.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, now you like it.
Yeah. So remember how earlier I was talking about the fact that Selena inaccurately associates Cain and Cale together? Or accurately, whatever the case is. I think we see it again here when she learns where Cale's family is from. Quote, it somehow made sense that Cale's family ruled Aniel. The citizens of Aniel were warriors from birth and had been guardians against the hordes of the wild men from the White Fang Mountains for generations. Who is from the White Fang Mountains? Cain. Subconsciously, I think Selena is making the connection, but at least this time, Cain is in opposition to Cale rather than the same.
And, as she's thinking about this, quote, the thought of Cale going up against hundreds of them, against men built like Cain, made her a little sick. It's interesting because it's like, do we believe this development? Like she's this, her concern for Cale, she spent a lot of time with him, sure. But is that enough time for her to care? Or is this more thinking that Cale is soft and would probably be instantly slaughtered? We've been seeing her rile him up. And I think this is her kind of saying, well, maybe I do care. Maybe I would be a little scared for him.
Yeah.
When Selena is just chilling in her room, Cale comes in to talk to her. Quote, he'd really come to talk to her about a book when a champion's corpse had just been found that morning? Didn't she say earlier that she didn't care when she threw the throwing star and was like, I don't care if I'm smiling and there's another corpse. But now it's like, you want to speak to me when there's a corpse? And granted, it's probably because she thinks it's his responsibility to look for it, but whatevs. We're starting to see that connection of the mind. And this is the connection that's going to make him the real love interest over Dorian. And, it's what's going to ground the two of them. There's more. There's more to that.
What do you mean by connection of the mind?
He's coming to talk to her about books.
Oh, I see.
Like, think of it this way. Dorian sent her a note saying, I like this book. I think you'd like it. And they kind of communicate a little bit through notes. Cale came over and sat down to talk to her about it rather than this like little flirtatious note. And that's the connection of the mind that I'm hinting
that makes
towards.
sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
You.
Selena is demonstrating another moment of quid pro quo. As I've said, a common exchange of information and vulnerability in SJM books. And I think the vulnerability is what we're starting to see come into play right now with Cale. Because Cale was willing to reveal information about his upbringing and how he abdicated his title, Selena returns the favor. Quote, When I was 12, Arobin Hamill decided I wasn't nearly as skilled at swordplay with my left hand, so he gave me a choice. Either he could break my right hand, or I could do it myself. That night, I put my hand against a doorframe and slammed the door shut on it. I split my hand wide open and broke 2 bones. It took months to heal, months during which I could only use my left hand. She gave him a vicious smile. I bet Brulo never did that to you. Selena's upbringing was abusive. And it's one she did not get to choose. And we're only going to get to see more of that abuse and her conflicting feelings about it. What I think is important from this discussion is that we see Selena as a child make decisions where she could maintain power over her fate. That is a hard choice to make as a child, to be willing to break your own hand. But she chose it because she could control the situation. That is so different from Kale, who's had control over his path. He gets to choose to abdicate his title, unlike Selena, who was forced out of hers. And it's in this way that Kale and Selena will never be equals. They will never have enough common ground to really stay together as love interests, because Kale has had it easy in a way that Selena never has. And so Kale's not capable of understanding what Selena has gone through.
No, that's why she ends up with someone who has the most tragic backstory.
Yep, absolutely. When Selena tells her story, it does come across as a little bit mocking of Kale, but I think that the viciousness we see from her is more about her finding difficulty being vulnerable and sharing something that was formative for her. Yeah, she offered up the information, but I think her vulnerability with Kale is almost against her will sometimes, because she's just as defensive as she is vulnerable, right? She's defensive about it, making it seem like it's normal or acceptable, while also telling this really abusive story. That's why, in my mind, Selena lies about being ready for the next day and the trial that's coming in order to avoid being any more vulnerable than she already has been.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it interesting, right? Like that there's a story of choice and the choice being taken away, you know, the contradiction between the two, and the fact that, you know, you can manipulate someone and give them the illusion of choice, which, you know, you can argue that's a larger theme in this series in general. Also, the final quote in this chapter: "In the silence that followed in his wake, she contemplated his story and the paths that had made them so different but so similar." She sees the similarities, she sees the differences, and like we were talking, there's more differences than similarities, but right now she's going to look for those similarities because, you know, he's hot. So you girls got to do what you got a girl to do. Chapter 15 starts and it is test day. Quote, "Though she never admitted, Selena didn't really know what to expect at their first test." What I want to look there is the "she would never admit it" part, because of course she wouldn't. It's very true to her character and her ego. And I want to come back to those black and white floors when we first saw the challenge room. You know, it was like black and white. Remember? Quote, "But the sponsors atop the mezzanine looked over the black and white checkered floor like chess. You know, they're pieces of a chess puzzle. Like they're playing chess with them. Their games. It's just, I liked it."
No, I think that's a great point. Because again, their game, their fouls, their chess pieces, like they're pawns.
That's the word.
Selena does come across as a little bit anxious in this setting in anticipation of the first test. Quote, "She adjusted the thick leather belt slung low across her hips. It was the kind of belt intended to bear the weight of multiple weapons. Its lightness now only reminded her of what she'd lost and what she had to gain. The weapons belt and the fact that it's empty is a visual symbol of her lack of power, whether that's over her situation or, you know, weakness compared to what she's capable of is to be seen. I am curious to see how the weapons belt does reappear throughout the novel or the series. I genuinely don't remember. So I just wanted to mark it in case it comes up again.
Yeah. You can also look at this from different angles too. Like you obviously have the loss and weight of the weapons themselves, but you also have the consequences of the weapons that have the weight and then the loss of those consequences. So you have the weight and you have the weight and loss of her freedom. During the competition, quote, "Some competitors began murmuring, but it was all she could to keep from beaming. Unfortunately, Kane didn't bother to hide his triumphant grin. Why couldn't he have been the champion that was found dead?" It says that unfortunately, Kane didn't bother to hide his triumphant grin. Like, That's what makes her mad. That's the thing that does it for her. Not that he knows how to shoot a bow and arrow, not that he's kind of a jerk. It's the fact that he shows off his triumphant grin. Now for this other quote. Archery was one of the first skills Arobynn had taught her, a staple of any assassin's training. 2 of the assassins further proved it with easy, skilled shots, though they didn't hit the bullseye, and their shots got sloppier the farther the target. Whoever their master had been, they know what they were teaching. The relationship that she has with her own instructor is going to be really complex, because you can tell there's a certain amount of pride that she takes from Arobynn. And we clearly see how abusive he was to her, right? Like the whole slamming her hand thing, and then the fact that she's like taking pride. But he also taught her how to be a killer and survive, which is another form of abuse itself. So the thing that she's taking pride in is another form of abuse. But Celaena sees the value in this knowledge that she's gained, even though she knows that it's horrible, right? Like, so she sees the pros, even though it's all cons.
There's something odd about this whole trials system that really brings to focus how bad all the circumstances are and how bad her circumstances have been. It's all she can do to celebrate it. Otherwise, you know, what else can she do? Be upset about it, regret it, feel guilty? No. So she has to celebrate it to cope. It's just the same as seeing swordplay as dancing. She has to find the good in order to justify the bad. So to Celaena's surprise, the first test is just an archery contest. Because she's later in line, she gets to observe how everyone else does. And to her chagrin, Cain does very well. Quote, all she could think about was Cain. Cain getting applauded by Parrington, Cain getting clapped on the back by Brullo, Cain getting all of that praise and attention, not because he was a mountain of muscle, but because he actually deserved it. So once again, Celaena's judgment of a person, he's just a mountain of muscle, he's not really anything, he doesn't really have skills, comes back to bite her in the ass because she's wrong. Now, we learn with time and just from her general attitude that Celaena is accustomed to praise, acclaim, and notoriety. You don't get called Adarlan's best assassin without wanting to be called Adarlan's best assassin. To not have those things, the praise, the acclaim, the notoriety, it festers like a bad splinter in Celaena's mind. We can tell by her annoyance as first-time readers that she doesn't like others getting the positive attention. She's a jealous 18-year-old child. It is relatable. I understand feeling that way anytime I didn't do the best in class. I get it. Quote, but though she hadn't lost by any means, Celaena couldn't stand, absolutely could not stand the feeling that she hadn't really won anything at all. At the end of the day, Celaena hates being in the middle. And something about this feels very ominous to me. And I genuinely don't remember if it is. But what we do see in later books is this idea that Celaena and or Aelin have to have it a certain way, have to be able to keep their secrets a certain way, have to win a certain way, because that's what makes them feel good.
Yep.
And we're already picking up on that character trait here.
Oh, yes. So early on.
So early on.
And Celaena's ego and her pride and her jealousy is just going to get the better of her. It's funny how much is being shoved in her face. Now, at one point, she says to herself, quote, I am Celaena Sardothien. I am going to win. I will not be afraid. And it just hurts my heart because it's like, oh my God, it's coming. It's coming.
Well, yeah. And you see how the mantra has been with her early on.
Yeah.
But we don't know the significance of it at this early stage.
I know. I'm going to cry. No, I'm not. I just have something in my eye. It's my contact. So back to the competition. Quote, the arrow hit the absolute center, obliterating the black dot. They stopped laughing. She needs to prove herself. She needs to prove like I'm the one who freaking does it. And, you know, we're shitting her on for having an ego and pride, but like, why shouldn't women have ego and pride? You know, I think that's something that we typically are more harsh with on women than we are with men. Men get to be more egotistical. Men get to have more pride, but we shit on women. We're doing it now, but I'm here to do it. So I would like to point out that she did shoot the arrow. She got it. She should be proud 100%. We just expect her to be smarter. You don't fall into your pride. Also, like, she's just not a very good winner. Like, she's not very good at handling being a winner. And we have like the fact that like the loser dies, like they go away and we don't know what their fate is, but we do know that we get to be happy with her surviving. So that takes us at the end of this freaking 5-chapter
4-hour.
This just gets longer. Let's get into some breadcrumbs and broomsticks because, oh my God.
In chapter 11, when Selena is sword fighting with Kale, she describes herself as, quote, fast like a snake in the red desert. This reference is important to the storyline of Selena in the Red Desert found in Assassin's Blade. And I think it's a lovely, lovely tie that keeps coming back up that we don't understand the significance of.
In chapter 13, quote, you might fight well, but your manners are a disgrace. She waited for him to mention her earlier vomiting, but he didn't continue. I can act and talk like a lady if I please, aka her royal background.
When Selena meets Nehemia and offers to guide her to where she needs to go, Selena asks, why are you in Rifthold, if I might ask? She added, Your Highness. This is a breadcrumb because Selena is unaccustomed to addressing royalty as royalty because she herself is royal. Therefore, they're equal.
Yep. Still in chapter 13, quote, before departing this morning, the king hadn't taken any of the guards he suggested he bring on the journey and refused to say where he was going or to accept his offer of accompaniment. He's just a Valg doing Valg things. Val's got a Valg.
And that's why he ignores Kale, because Kale's a weak little human.
He is.
In chapter 14, Selena notices, quote, a large ring of black iridescent stone glimmered on Kane's finger. Strange that he'd wear it to practice. Well, that's because it's got Valg control all over it. Or it's really the Valg controlling Kane, but you know what I mean.
Also in chapter 14, quote, my parents are dead, she said. They died when I was 8. So you, her heart thundered in her chest. I was born in Terrasen. Then I became an assassin. Then I went to Endovier, and now I'm here. That's it. She obviously doesn't want him to know something, like, you know, who her parents are or how they died or how she ended up in Aderlin or who the hell she is.
And just to clarify, that was Kale and Selena talking about her past.
Yeah.
And last but not least, in chapter 15, when Nox and Selena are talking and he asks if she knows what the test is, Selena thinks, quote, even if she knew what was behind the curtain, she certainly wouldn't help him, Nox Owen, which is ironic because that's all she does.
He's her subject. We have been on here so long that the sun has left all my light. If you guys watch the YouTube of this, it's hilarious. You can see the sun setting and everything. Okay.
I know. I need to come over and set up your new light.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Amy, I think you have a question for me.
I do. What do we learn about how Selena views herself in the way that she judges others?
I actually think there's a lot of self-hatred. I think that we've obviously established that whatever Selena says, her ostentatiousness, it's a big front. It's a big, oh, look over here. I'm not the princess that you're looking for. Like, it's a huge front. I think some of this shows like the seeking of appraisal, this need for recognition, this need for everything. You know, we keep pointing out her pride, her ego. If she truly had pride, the right kind of pride, she would be there for her kingdom. She would try to be there for Terrasen. She would be fighting to get an army. That's the kind of pride that would get her through. This is a very weak kind of pride. This is a very egotistical pride. It's not the kind of pride that carries an army, right? Every single time we get a very weak, very catty moment from her, it shows her age. It shows a lot of things about her. I think it shows a lot of self-hatred.
I think you hit it on the head. I think that Selena deep down has a lot of guilt. And right now, she doesn't want to feel, experience, think through that guilt. And as a writer, SJM can't allow her to do that because even Selena's identity is hidden from us as readers. What I think, to Jac's point about the ego, the pride, all that stuff, it's Selena's way of justifying her current existence in the world and saying, hey, you know what? This is where I'm meant to be. I'm good at this. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what the fates wanted.
Yeah.
And that's how she gets through life, is by justifying her current existence through other people's validation.
Yeah. There's good pride, there's bad pride. Like, I don't think we should look at pride as an entirely bad thing. I think, you know, we should take pride in our place. We should take pride in our work. We should look at what we do and say, yeah, I did that. And we should be proud of ourselves. We'll see her get to that point. But God, she goes low. I don't know if we see it until like maybe the last chapter of the last book.
Yeah, it takes a long time to get there. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. Next week, we will be exploring chapter 16 through 22 of Throne of Glass.
We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. We would also love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our forum at booktalkforbooktok.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktok.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at the handle BookTok for Book Talk.
Bye.
Bye. Ugh, bangs. They irritate my face. Malnutrition. I all of a sudden have to sneeze.
I'll take a sip. Ooh, 4. Okay.
For maybe the first time since... Take a sip. Play it off.
So you don't get mad.
At the end of the scene, we get a new scene, and it's the next day. And when Kale walks into Selena's bedroom...
Wait, say that again. At the end of the scene, we get a new scene.
Sorry. There is a magnanimity. I can say the word in my head. I can't say it out loud. Yeah, I say in our recordings a lot, and I'm recognizing that the more I edit.